This is said to be one of the most important midterm elections in generations. Everybody is talking about it, from politicians to celebrities. You can't even drive down the street without seeing a political ad or getting on social media without scrolling past a post on politics. Even President Donald Trump has said in recent days that he's never seen a midterm election this electric. So what makes this one so different? Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Royce Jones.
And I'm Kimberly Kagi. That's what we hope to answer tonight as some of us break down some of the biggest concerns among our college demographic. Our team of reporters has spoken with experts on topics from gun control to LGBTQ rights. We will also be bringing you to the minute newsroom results from some of the most talked about races in this election.
We begin tonight with the races that mean the most here in Pennsylvania. First, let's discuss the gubernatorial race between incumbent Democratic Governor Tom Wolf and former Republican State Senator Scott Wagner. Governor Tom Wolf was elected back in 2014 by a margin of 10 percentage points. But if you recall, during the 2016 elections, President Trump led the state of Pennsylvania by only 1% margin. This race could really go either way. And in fact, polls show the past 10 gubernatorial races were split between Republican and Democratic candidates. We'll be keeping a close eye on this one.
And another race we're following is the U.S. Senate race between U.S. Democratic Senator Bob Casey and his top challenger, U.S. Republican Representative Lou Barletta. Barletta is looking to unseat Casey in this race. The two share very opposing views on topics like Trump's tax cut legislation, abortion rights, and health care. We'll have the latest on these results.
And tonight, we're also keeping a close watch on the only race between two incumbents in the country happening right here in our state. And that's none other than the race between Congressman Connor Lamb and Keith Rothfus. They're battling for the 17th district in the congressional seat there. Very unusual circumstances, too. You may remember, due to the Supreme Court redrawing of Pennsylvania congressional districts, parts of Lamb's 18th district and Rothfus's 12th district combined, creating the 17th district. This affects residents in parts of Butler and Allegheny counties. We'll have the latest. And we begin tonight with the races that mean the most here in Pennsylvania. First, let's discuss the gubernatorial race between incumbent Democratic Governor Tom Wolf and former Republican State Senator Scott Wagner. Governor Tom Wolf was elected back in 2014 by a margin of 10 percentage points. But if you recall, during the 2016 elections, President Trump led the state of Pennsylvania by only 1% margin. The race could really go either way, and in fact, polls do show the past 10 gubernatorial races were split between Republican and Democratic candidates. We'll be keeping a close eye on that.
And another race we're following is the U.S. Senate race between U.S. Democratic Senator Bob Casey and his top challenger, U.S. Republican Representative Lou Barletta. Barletta is looking to unseat Casey in this race. The two share very opposing views on topics like Trump's tax cut legislation, abortion rights, and health care. We'll have the latest on these results.
And tonight, we're also keeping a close watch on the only race between two incumbents in the country happening right here in our state, and that's none other than the race between Congressman Connor Lamb and Keith Rothfus. They're battling for the 17th congressional district. Very unusual circumstances, too. You may remember, due to the Supreme Court redrawing of Pennsylvania congressional districts, parts of Lamb's 18th district and Rothfus's 12th district combined, creating the 17th. This affects residents in parts of Butler and Allegheny counties, and we will have the latest. And in the Senate, Republicans are hopeful they retain their slim majority, even if the party loses to the House. Democrats need a net gain of 2 seats to win the upper chamber. Currently, there are 51 Republican senators. Democrat senators total to 49, including 2 independents who causes with the party. 35 total Senate races are in play here. There are 3 open seats. And for the current balance of power in the House, Republicans have controlled the House of Representatives since 2011, following Tea Party wave that swept dozens of GOP members into office. The partisan breakdown of the House stands as 18 seats are needed for a majority. There are currently 235 of Republican members. As of for Democrats, though, 193. There are 7 vacancies, which include 5 former Republicans and 2 Democrats. And the Trump administration has been in power for 2 years now, and today on Election Day, President Trump announced his endorsement nominee in New Jersey's Senate race. Bob Hugin is challenging Democratic Senator Bob Mendez. President Trump made efforts in dismantling protection of transgender service members, closing our borders. And exit polls are a tricky prediction and do not always reflect the actual results of how the elections will turn out. Given the high stakes of the 2018 midterms and the intense interest in national candidates, many Americans will likely be on watch for these exit polls on national networks as polls close on today to find their first set of results. Beyond projecting the winner, exit polls can also help explain why a candidate won, indicating which voters went to the polls. Exit polls are created by interviewing voters at the polls in all 50 states. Absentee voters and early voters are interviewed by phone prior to the election. And according to CBS exit polls, those suggest that President Trump was a factor that significantly affected voting for the House. Those are 1 in 4 voters. 26% said they did support him and 39% oppose him. 33% said the election isn't about the president at all. Voters reported that their number one issue in this election is health care. Voters do feel good about the state of the economy. And coming up on the other side of the break, we'll discuss one hot button issue that has drawn party lines on the ballots this year. Find out which issue that is and how it's affected the city of Pittsburgh in recent weeks.
Live from Point Park University's Center for Media Innovation, Election Night 2018 will return after the break.
I know just the trick. Bippity, boppity, boop! Much better. Guys, Samir Nesby, and I'm outside of the Benedum Center right now. So in just a few moments, we're going to go inside the Benedum Center to talk to Trevor Dion Nicholas, who plays the genie in Disney's Aladdin. I'm Samir Nesby giving you the theatrical scoop for the Berg. Hey guys, so I'm now inside the Benedum Center with Trevor Dion Nicholas, who plays the genie in Disney's Aladdin. What a treat that was to attend. But before the show started, I had the chance to go backstage and talk with one of the talented members of the cast, Bianca Horn. Let's take a look.
You're watching Election Night 2018 on UView Television.
Welcome back. With each election cycle comes hot button issues that some voters inform their choices on. In light of the recent massacre at the synagogue in Squirrel Hill, the issue of gun control is again in the headlines. People are concerned with the ease of access to firearms. UView's Megan Masiosi files this report exploring how easy it is to get a gun in Pennsylvania.
Gun control is always a hot topic, especially around election time. And in this year, 2018, we've had no shortage of the discussion. According to the National Public Radio, so far this year, we've had 26 school shootings and 53 new safety laws passed because of it. And here in Pittsburgh, we've experienced our own tragedy with gun control at the Tree of Life Synagogue here in Squirrel Hill. So how easy is it to get a gun in the state of Pennsylvania?
Virtually anybody can. A long gun, as the laws stand right now, can be sold with just a simple receipt between people. If you are ordering a gun online, It has to come through a federal firearms licensed dealer to have the paperwork done at that dealer.
According to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, anyone 18 years and older can obtain or sell a gun after they pass a basic background check.
Basically, you have to show your ID, make sure it is a long gun, a rifle, or shotgun.
However, the rules are different for purchasing a handgun. In the state of Pennsylvania, you must be 21 years or older to purchase one.
Basically, you go in and do the background check. We make a phone call to the PA State Police, and if your background checks out, you are able to take the gun home.
A background check in the state of Pennsylvania includes employment verification, credit history, criminal history, and education. Once an individual obtains a handgun, they have the option to apply for a concealed permit. According to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, a concealed carry permit is defined as a weapon, especially handguns, which are kept hidden on one's person or under one's control. According to a study conducted by the American Journal of Public Health earlier this year, roughly 3 million Americans carry a loaded handgun every day. 80% of the surveyors stated personal protection as their primary reason to carry.
If you had nationwide concealed carry, if you go on a trip or whatever, or somebody comes to our state, that we had reciprocal, it would be, so much easier. Basically, if you can pass the background check to buy the gun, you're going to pass the background check probably to carry the gun.
At the gun range, there are 2 safety measures that you must always have, whether you're the shooter or the observer. One of those is a pair of earmuffs, and the other one is safety glasses. So if there's safety procedures here at the gun range, then what are some safety procedures that you can take for you and your family at home?
A small lockbox works. There's many people that buy them especially if they just have 1 or 2 handguns. If you have, a couple guns, you have a gun safe, it's going to buy you quite a bit more time and the guns are going to be safe. Usually they have electronic lock or a numerical lock, and only people that have the key or only people that have the combination can get into it.
According to a survey conducted by the Journal of Urban Health, an estimated 4.6 million children live in homes with unsecured guns. Seister has one message for parents when it comes to teaching their children about gun safety.
Kids are curious by nature, and the earlier that they are taught something, the better it is. Especially with child rearing, a lot of learning is repetitive, and the earlier that you start to do that, the better.
Kids aren't the only ones at risk. According to a survey from the pediatrics, only 35% of gun-owning parents whose teens have shown risk factors of self-harm and depression stored all guns locked and unloaded.
Guns can be inherently dangerous, and it's something that's like a full-time job. You can't just do it once and expect the child to adhere to what you're telling them.
According to a study conducted by Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, 54% of U.S. gun owners do not properly lock up or store their guns. Gun control can be expected to be a very hot topic between the 2 candidates here in Pennsylvania. Reporting for Point Park University in Plum Borough, I'm Megan Masiosi.
And joining us now in the studio is Megan Masiosi.
Thanks, guys. So yeah, covering this package, it was definitely, there's a lot more laws than I thought there was going to be. Going in, the guys at Bees Guns were very open to talking about it with me. The one interviewer I did have, he's a gun safety expert, and he did say before you purchase any type of gun, whether that's a handgun or a long gun, like he explained, you should always take at least 2 to 3 safety courses. Either that be with him or at somewhere else. There's plenty of resources. If you go onto the PA, it's the PA.gov, and they have plenty of safety courses that you can take, and he highly recommends them just so that you can protect you and your family at home, and no one will be at risk.
Now, Megan, you mentioned a little bit about those safety courses. Now, when you take a safety course, what does that entail, and what kind of procedures do you learn about during the course?
So there's a couple different types that you can take, and you can take them at any age. They start the youngest at 12, and it's called the Hunter Safety Course, which obviously is more for the sport of hunting. But it does show you where the safety is on whatever type of gun you're using, whether that's a muzzle loader, a shotgun, even a bow and arrow. They have them for that as well. Like I said, those start at 12 and your parents do come along. You could take more at 16 as well with another long gun. There's more at 18 because that's when you can purchase your first gun. And then at 21, they actually do call the PA police to let them know that you are buying a gun. We'll get more into that later. But yeah, so in these courses, they teach you where your safety is, how to properly load and unload, load and reload the barrel of the gun, because when you're actually at the shooting range, if you have a handgun, you're supposed to take it out, as you'll see it in my package, and lay it down flat with the unloaded barrel next to it, so that everyone in the range knows that you're not going to pull a loaded gun into where other people are. So in these courses, they just teach you basic safety on, never point a gun at somebody, always keep it down range. Just basic stuff like that to keep everybody around you and you safe.
Okay, Megan, and you sort of set the scene there in your story just about the age ranges of some of the people, potential gun owners, their parents. Can you tell us why you were there, some of the things that you saw? Were there a lot of people there? What was the age demographic that you saw there, if any? Can you sort of set the scene for that for us?
Right, so Bees Guns is a little shop in Apollo, so it's in Westmoreland County. Whenever I went in there, they did ask me to come at like a low time so that I could do the interview, but I went back to get some B-roll for my package. And honestly, I saw mostly like middle-aged Caucasian men in there buying guns, just talking with the guys. But surprisingly, there was actually a female that had come in. She looked to be maybe about 26, 27, and her house had recently been broken into, and so just for personal safety, she wanted to purchase a handgun, and that's when she realized she had to go through a little bit of the process and background check to actually obtain the gun. But yeah, not a lot of women in there, but mostly Caucasian men.
Now, you were just discussing about how the female was going through the procedure of a background check. Can you tell us a little bit more about what does the background check entail and what does it cover specifically?
So there's two different background checks. One is if you're 18 and you're buying a long barrel gun, which is like a shotgun typically. So through that, you have to have a background check, which takes about 30 days. It can be less, but most of the time it's 30 days, they were saying. And it goes through your criminal history, so they're gonna go through if you've even had a parking ticket. It goes through your credit history to see if after you do pass this, can you purchase the gun? And then it also just asks basic information, date, social security, your birth date, social security, your address. Basically, if you're buying a gun, they wanna know who you are, who's selling it to you, can you actually afford it? So they do that, but one thing that they don't put on there is like a mental history. So I know that's been in discussions, but the second one is for your carry permit. It's a little more in depth. It's 45 days. It has all the same credit history, criminal history, and your basic information, but it also has your employment on there. And that's just so that they can see, because of like the San Bernardino shooting, this is a newer thing they've put in the background checks. They just want to see where you work, so that if you do leave your job and happen to go purchase a gun, something like that wouldn't happen, and they would turn you down if you were maybe previously terminated a couple weeks ago.
Now, you mentioned something that's been a big issue, and especially in 2018, but throughout the Americans' generational history, mass shootings in America, and this has been seen progressing since President Trump was elected in 2016. Now, there was a mass shooting in Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life Synagogue on 2 Saturdays ago. Royce, can you tell us a little bit about that? I know that you covered that for your station.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, I actually work in the West Virginia, Ohio Valley Market, and I remember we were watching on the monitors, because in our newsroom there are several television monitors, and you can see the live feed from some other stations' cameras, and so I was watching it. I'm from the Pittsburgh area, so I'm familiar with KDKA, our station here. We're a CBS partner, so we can have access to their live feed, and I remember seeing I interned there as well, so I saw some of my former colleagues on camera, and normally whenever you see those live feeds, they are getting ready to go live and cut in for a protest or a shooting somewhere else. But typically, in my time being there, I've never seen something like that happen here, you know what I mean? So when I saw some familiar faces on that monitor, I was wondering immediately what is going on. So we turned up all of the volume on the televisions there and started listening, and it really wasn't necessarily the sound and the things that I heard that shocked me, but it was the things that you were seeing in the background. police running. You could see the panic in people's eyes, and you could really see that tense environment. I've been on the scenes of SWAT situations, police standoffs, fires, other breaking stories, but I had never been at something like this and noticed that panic. It was something that I wasn't familiar with, so seeing it immediately in my mind, I was wondering what is happening here, and then come to find out through our AP wire, we saw that it was something very devastating happening there, and that would be that shooting there. And so I can tell you that. And then we also localized that story at my station. Like I said, I'm in the Ohio Valley market, so we reached out to some people in the Jewish community in Wheeling, West Virginia, specifically at Temple Shalom. And that really is the main, I guess you could say, hub for the Jewish community there. It's one of the only synagogues there. And I met with a guy, his name is Joshua, the rabbi there, his name's Joshua Leaf, and he actually told me that the Jewish community in Pittsburgh and the Jewish community in Wheeling as well are fairly intertwined. He actually said that a lot of people in his congregation have a lot of family ties that go to that congregation, the Tree of Life. And in fact, his sister was there, and she texted him and marked herself safe in that shooting. Sending him the text. They were at the grocery store whenever it happened. He didn't even know because he hadn't seen the news reports yet, and they were having their Saturday morning prayer service that happens every Saturday, and he got that text, and he told me everybody's phone started beeping, the push notifications started to come, and it was absolutely horrifying for them, and it's something that they're still working towards. They actually have introduced at this Temple Shalom in Wheeling an interfaith Thanksgiving dinner, and what that's going to do is bring all different religions together to celebrate and show unity and kind of come together in a really divided time. Now, Megan, I also want to ask you, I know that I saw some shots of the synagogue in your piece. I know that you were there. I want to know, I'm interested to see whenever you were there, some of the things that you saw, any memorials, anything, indicators of support while you were there. Can you tell us what you saw?
I think whenever you're there, obviously everyone is in mourning, but there was definitely like a lot of flowers along the side. There was always a lot of people crying, but I think just the support system of everybody there is very open. It, to an extent, kind of seemed like a safe place, even though a tragedy had just taken place. I mean, obviously the police presence was greater at that time, but just everybody kind of around. It was very somber, quiet at times as well. People would outburst. In crying and stuff, but there was also a lot of singing, which I thought was interesting because in a time of tragedy, a little bit of music can go a long way. So definitely a lot of singing, lots of flowers, visuals. I think there was a visual at least every single night that week. But yeah, just a lot of safe. Felt very safe there after that. Just between whether you wanted to talk about it, didn't want to talk about it. It was nice to see that after a tragedy had just taken place.
Now, it was reported that 11 people who were attending the religious services were dead and 6 officers were injured in those shootings. Now, Royce, I wanted to ask you a little bit, how do you think that we can introduce warning signs and preparedness for shootings?
Well, I know that they introduce a lot of things like the ALICE system here, and forgive my ignorance on the topic, but I can't specifically tell you what that acronym stands for. But basically, it's just a sign of awareness, things to be, it's a procedural step that they'll have students go through. They implement that in a lot of schools, and I know that some churches also implement this. Anywhere that really has a large body of people that will be gathering, they introduce this ALICE system. And on the warning signs, I can also tell you too that I met with some police officials in Wheeling whenever I was covering this, and they tell me that they had implemented some extra patrol units near our synagogue. Now, we're an hour away from Pittsburgh, but they did issue some extra patrol units near our synagogue there in Wheeling, that Temple Shalom that I told you about earlier. They did implement some extra patrol cars there for safety, and they also have response tactics in place. A lot of the emergency management officials have response tactics in place were a disaster like this to happen in that area. And I also know that a lot of first responding teams in all jurisdictions really do have things like this set in place. There is a procedure that they do follow if, you know, anything were to happen, if they get warning of anything, they do have those tactics in place. So Megan, I think that whenever you say that feeling of being safe, I think that's definitely stands true. And I can tell you just from a law enforcement perspective that that definitely does stand true too. And Megan, I also want to know, I mean, what can you tell us about this as far as safety is concerned?
Obviously, safety is their number one concern, especially now. Especially after a tragedy, you always see security heightened everywhere around the city and obviously around their synagogues. But what I thought was really interesting and really showed religions coming together, even though they might have differences, is the Muslim community did tell the Jewish community that if they needed people to stand outside of their services, that they would absolutely do it. And I think that is a much better route to go rather than having armed guards. I don't agree with that. But I do believe that having a sense of security, even if it's from people who might not believe in the same thing as you, I think that was really great. And I thought what was interesting too was the Muslim community came out and said they would do that for them since after the presidential election in 2016, and there was a lot of hostility raised towards the Muslim community. That synagogue had actually told the Muslim community that they would support them as well and be extra security for them. So it's really nice to see two different religious groups coming together. And I think just having that little bit of extra security, even if it's from somebody who would just be like, hey, what are you doing here, if they haven't seen them in a while, I think that just gives everybody going into synagogue a little peace of mind for their service that day.
Yeah, and Megan, whenever I spoke with people that I spoke with from the Jewish community, they also mentioned that, you know, President Trump obviously did say that, you know, if there were armed security guards there, that this whole situation could have been avoided. I did talk to some members from the Jewish community about that, and they didn't necessarily say, I mean, they did say that certainly, you know, that is for sure, any type of security will obviously prevent any type of disaster from happening. But the thing that he kind of really pointed out to me was that if somebody wants to come in, and this is what Rabbi Leaf said, if somebody wants to come in and they want to cause a disaster and they want to shoot, and it is an active shooting incident, they are going to try to make it happen however they can. So while it does, you know, it could prevent, you know, I did speak with people who say that maybe it wouldn't. I definitely think that that's also interesting. Megan, I do want to ask you one last thing about school shootings. I mean, when we're talking about school shootings, sort of pulling back the scope here and moving on to a sort of a different topic, where does bullying or harassment sort of fit into this? I know you might have some research on that.
So we've actually had 26 school shootings this year, which I mentioned in my package, And because of that, there's been 53 new safety laws created in schools, which I thought was absolutely crazy. I had no idea about that. And I think it's because 54% of gun owners do not properly lock up their guns. And even gun owners who admitted that they knew their children had some mental health problems or were struggling in school, they still don't lock up their guns. And I think for students in schools, you know, they obviously already feel bad about themselves. They feel minuscule compared to the other students. I think for them, it's a way out. It's a way to show that they can be dominant, they can be the superior instead of the inferior at that point. But that's whenever I was talking to the gun safety expert, and Shyster did say, you know, you have to teach your kids gun safety no matter what the age. Start young and continuously tell them. It should be almost an everyday thing. And he said, treat it like a full-time job, like you're parenting. So it starts with the parents at home.
Well, thank you, Megan, for joining us. And when we return, we will join our media partners at WPPJ. And WPPJ is broadcasting all night with analysis, results, and interviews. Throughout the night, we will check in with WPPJ and their hosts, Robert Berger and Alex Popichak. They're answering your questions live on WPPJ as well. So be sure to post to social media using the hashtag #PointParkVotes.
And later, we will talk about voter turnout and answer your questions from social media. We'll have more for you when we come back.
Live from Point Park University's Center for Media Innovation, Election Night 2018 will return after the break.
Newsnight, we attempt to make a promo. That and more, next.
Good evening and welcome to Newsnight. It is a day. I am an anchor. Here's some news. Now over to weather.
Look at all this weather!
Thanks, weather person. Now about an in-depth story.
Thanks, Anchor. Why do we have a story that's in-depth and possibly local?
Great, thanks. How about sports? Do we have sports?
Sports are certainly happening, and here's a graphic to prove it.
Wow, what a graphic. That's your news tonight, and I'm an anchor.
We're getting hope today.
Hi, we're here to get hope today.
Each year, 2.7 million adoptable dogs and cats are euthanized in the U.S. According to the Humane Society of the United States, the amount of euthanized animals can be diminished if more consumers considered adoption rather than purchasing pets. All animals deserve hope for a happy home.
Come here, girl.
Be that hope for your next four-legged friend. Visit your local shelter for a chance at hope. Bring home hope.
You're watching Election Night 2018 on UView Television.
Of my voice. You are either listening to us on WPPJradio.com or you have visited us through UView Television. It's an adventure in time and space. We're doing a simulcast, and I think our crack team has done an amazing job putting it all together. But yeah, we're working on that. Cool. Anyway, so yeah, I'm just looking at program notes and the sort. But Dennis, you are our polling guru and that kind of a thing.
I don't know if I'd call myself a guru.
All right, we'll reset here in a second. Hello to those of you joining us now on UView Television. We are the WPPJ crew. My name's Alex Popichak, and I'm joined in studio by Robert Berger. And we are also joined in studio by our man Dennis McDermott here. Dennis has been watching polls for us and will continue to watch throughout the night. We've been talking about turnout and how that affects the results of tonight's broadcast, or no, not today's broadcast, tonight's contests. So we got to talking about Robert. You were at polling places today.
Correct.
What was the vibe like?
The vibe, there were a lot of people. Both times I had to wait in long lines just to speak to the the poll workers. In both places, they had pretty much a record turnout for how early it was in the day. It was 1 o'clock. Strip District at their EMS station, they do polling there, and they were already over 50% of their voters coming out in the day. And same with the North Shore, where half of their voters had already come out in the day, which is like well over 300 people before like 2 o'clock.
Now I was at polling places earlier in the day, and really right after it opened, and it tends to be that voters come in three waves. This is what one of the poll workers had told me. You have your immediately as it opens rush, you have your lunchtime rush, and then you have the everyone else rush.
Yeah,
there was there was a fella who had said, "Oh, just wait until the college is let out," and he was gesturing across the street to Duquesne University because both Duquesne and Point Park vote at that same location.
Oh, yeah. I remember the lines are always out the door there on voting day. I remember the presidential election checking it out, but that's pretty much what the North Shore polling people told me, that it comes in waves. You're kind of between them right now, and once, 6 o'clock comes, everyone's out of work, lines are going to be out the door, and then, of course, we got the 8 o'clockers coming in who are going to be in line until probably 9 o'clock.
And we do have some data trickling in to the official state websites, but it's not enough to make any sort of anything of. And that's what's really interesting about these midterm elections is they're far more local. You have your governor's race, which is a statewide race. You have your senator race, which is a statewide race. But you also have these House of Representatives races and your state houses of representative that are really like local issues based, but also are being drawn into this national conversation with big topics like immigration and abortion and gun rights and that kind of a thing. And I know Megan Masiosi did a brilliant piece over for the television side on how easy it is to access a gun in the state of Pennsylvania. And again, you'll need to check out our package to do that. But it's just a lot of issues colliding and informing people going to very local polls.
Yeah, exactly. Like we were saying, just local. Yeah, it's all local, and that's what we need to see is people coming out to these polls to voice their concern.
I mean, it's not as local as your
Not
magistrate.
You're
anything,
not your
but,
magistrate, but still, like these districts, they're smaller, and yeah.
And they say all politics is local, and I think the midterms are an interesting way to look at it. In that you've got your hyperlocal, your broader, and then your national national contests. So you were Dennis, you were talking to us about the nuances of polling and what makes a good poll versus what's a bad poll. Could you explain that? You're really into the predictions game, so I'm fascinated to hear what you what makes a good poll. Where do you get your data? That kind of thing. Can you speak to that for us?
Yes, I can. And generally what makes a good poll is the poller themselves, the people who are conducting the poll. Have they been correct in the past? How well have they done in the past? And are the results credible? 538 does a great job of collecting these polls and giving them ratings. Other websites do this as well. But it's great because you can look at the polls that have been rated well and have done well in the past and really do that. But polls in general, it's not generally one poll you want to look at because one poller can only do so much polling before, they're overwhelming themselves. So it's really a collection of lots of polls, good or bad, that really tell you the results of how the election is going to go. It's just a saturation of polls that really tell you how each individual House race and even Senate race will end up.
So how far down do these pollsters drill? Do they go down to, your 17th Pennsylvania, or is it more of a, state by state as a local?
The pollers, generally you see colleges do a lot of polling, and they will go very deep into the election, but you really only see it in hot button elections, which is why we struggle sometimes. But you do have local pollers, and those are harder to trust because they have less credibility and less results among them.
When you say results, you're talking sample size, correct?
Yes,
yeah.
Of course. And yes, but they do go very deep, and you will see even House elections get polls, and those will come in too because they're hot elections, and if there's a risk of them flipping, they'll definitely go and poll them.
And ultimately, if we've learned anything from the past couple of years, it's that polls are great as exactly that, forecasts and predictions. But at the end of the day, I mean, it matters who shows up. So, Robert, you were at a polling place, as was I. Who is showing up to the polls?
The Strip District one that I was at, pretty much, it was a younger crowd, more of the workers that live, or live close and work there. But from what I heard on the North Shore, it was groups of everybody, and they were so happy to see that, and that's really good to see. She was like, the poll worker I was speaking with was saying that the parents are bringing their children, teaching them what is actually happening today. But along with that, it's the elderly, it's the younger kids that are working on, over in that area, and along with it's the disabled, it's the healthy. Everyone was coming in today and early.
And anecdotally, I don't think I've ever seen as many political-based posts about simply go to the polls and make sure your research is done as I've seen in the past. And that may just be a side effect of having social media connecting people, but I really think there might be something to that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, especially in the younger vote, this was something interesting that happened earlier in November. It was in early in October, a week before registration closed. Taylor Swift made like an Instagram post, and I forget what the percentage was, but they have never had, like, nationally, there was never a bigger jump from her, like, the time she posted this to the following week that voter registration had went up. And it's just interesting to see how big of an influence social media in, like, even just celebrities and the people on social media influence us in the younger vote.
And we were talking about this on Noon Hour, our like station branded show on the Noon Hour. We were talking about, like, people are also informed and trying to get informed. They're seeking out as much information on these candidates and races they've never heard of, prior to going into the polling booth.
That's true. And it's a lot easier now that we have social media, we have smartphones in our pocket that we can access, like, any information we want for free. If you want to know anything about any candidate, it's just one Google search away, and that's really great to see now because that's how you get the youth involved, I guess.
And But the frustrating part to this is that the data doesn't come in as instantaneously as you can learn about these candidates. So
very true. Also, when I was at the polls today, that's exactly what the North Shore polling workers were telling me, that people are more informed these days. They're actually reading the papers. They're not. She said pretty much a quote was, "They're not reading the comics section. They're caring about the issues, and they're reading the front page, and they're actually getting more involved." Because this lady had been working for 27 years at that same polling location, and she said every year has pretty much gotten better. It wasn't more of just this year, but it's been a gradual increase.
And one more thing to turn out. When you've also got this population, the millennial population. I hate to bring up that word, but you also have the most amount of people that are eligible of voting age.
That's true.
And it appears that they're being activated, or at least from the reports that I've seen from Next Gen, as well as some anecdotal reports from reporters on the ground, you're seeing a younger population actually coming out to vote, which there's this trope that the young folks don't come out to.
Yeah, the stats on that, they're 25% are in the 18 to 34, while the 65 and up is 24%. And that's the first time that's ever happened.
And it's fascinating to see the trend. It's going to be fascinating as the reports come in. Right now, you've got 7 out of 9,000 districts in Pennsylvania alone reporting, so that's 0.08%. It's not a lot of data, but it's going to be very interesting to parse out and see what issues mattered the most to folks.
And welcome back. Now we are using the hashtag #PointParkVotes on Twitter, and we'll send in, you can submit your questions there. Our social media team is checking that on the top of every hour. And with staggering results of early ballot voters, there has been at least 36 million, according to Michael McConnell, who is a professor from from Florida University who tracks voter turnout. Now this is a major leap, as it was in 2016. There was about 28 million then. So this has not been a normal election, as in the words of Michael McConnell.
At all. And I also do want to say, too, and we mentioned this earlier, but even the president is shocked about this. Also, a lot of people are saying that this could be sort of a referendum on him, his administration, and his entire agenda. So, I mean, there is a lot of weight on this election, and you're seeing a lot of young voters that are turning out for this. You're seeing them on social media, the participation. So a big voter turnout for sure this year. And on that, we are getting some live poll results. As during the commercial break, we got a few, so I'm going to read a couple here. Here's Source AP. This is in Ohio. This is for the Senate race here. Sherrod Brown and Representative Bill Johnson. AP is projecting that they will win re-election here with that. Again, that's Source AP, Sherrod Brown and Bill Johnson. Also here, we have the Florida Senate race with Rick Scott and Bill Nelson. This is polling in at 50-50, so we are at a split here. Approximately Scott is leading, and according to the New York Times, over 7 million votes have been submitted. 65% polling locations reported, and Rick Scott leads by a fraction. 94% reporting now. This is all coming in live here. Scott still leads by just over 2,000 votes, 50% to 49.6%. So super close there. The Florida governor's race is coming in 92% reporting. DeSantis is leading. Andrew Gilliam 50% to 48.8%. 94% here. So we are really seeing some close numbers, really head-to-head in this election so far. And again, we will continue to give you guys all the live information as it comes in, as we start getting more polling results. And now we're going to turn your attention over to the turnout for this year's elections. Actor Tom Hanks has been busy recently, starring as Mr. Rogers on set of the film You Are My Friend. But Hanks has also been busy on the political front. He spoke at Get Out the Vote rally at Soldiers and Sailors Museum in Oakland on September 25th. We have a clip from that rally in September featuring a part of Hanks's speech.
More than a couple of hundred years ago. Do you know this old saying? It explains who we are. At the time it was written, it explained only part of who we are, but now it explains and defines absolutely 100% of every American citizen in the world, wherever they are. Anybody who is old enough to vote is defined and instructed and inspired by words that you might know. The words are, we the people of the United States of America, in order to form a more perfect union, to establish justice and ensure tranquility, to provide for the common defense and promote the general welfare, to ensure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do hereby ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States. Let's break that down.
And on the other side of the break, we'll sit down with Ian Brady of Next Gen PA to talk about their efforts to energize young voters.
And later, Kiara Fry will tell you all you need to know about the impact of Black Lives Matter. And keep those questions coming too. We'll answer more from social media throughout the night. Don't forget that hashtag Point Park Votes. Be sure to tag all of your questions and comments with that hashtag Point Park Votes. Do not forget, you guys, and we are answering those questions.
UV's election night coverage will be right back, so stay tuned.
Live from Point Park University's Center for Media Innovation, Election Night 2018 will return after the break.
The show that starts your Friday mornings has returned with both familiar and new faces. Daybreak host Taylor Fife and Delaney Bomas are bringing you the latest updates in Pittsburgh and Point Park news. We also have a variety of talent on our free segments. Whether it be singing, dancing, or indeed egg smashing. Start your mornings with us at Daybreak on UView at UView Television.
Hi, we're here to get hope today.
Each year, 2.7 million adoptable dogs and cats are euthanized in the U.S. According to the Humane Society of the United States, the amount of euthanized animals can be diminished if more consumers considered adoption rather than purchasing pets. All animals deserve hope for a happy home.
Come here, girl.
Be that hope for your next four-legged friend. Visit your local shelter for a chance at hope. Bring home hope.
What concerns do you have about the university, student life, safety, food service? Send us an email to studentconcerns@pointpark.edu or stop by our office on the 7th floor of the Student Center. You can also attend our weekly open meetings on Mondays at 3:15. Follow us on social media at USG_PPU for more. The United Student Government. By the students, for the students.
Broadcasting from the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, you're listening to the sound of Point Park University. WPPJ 670 AM.
You're watching Election Night 2018 on UView Television.
And welcome back. Joining us now is Ian Brady from Next Gen. Ian, we want to welcome you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I think we really just kind of want to get straight to it here. So can you sort of first just map out what Next Gen is for the viewers at home who may not know?
Sure. So Next Gen, which began as Next Gen Climate, is it's a group of young voters. I want to say the oldest person I've interacted with in the organization on a national level, it's a national organization, was probably no older than 35. So it's basically young people registering and then engaging young voters.
And what were some of the challenges that you guys faced trying to register young voters? Did you have any challenges? Describe that.
We had some miscommunication regarding what was and what was not acceptable with outside organizations on campus, but we figured that all out and got lots of people registered here.
When you say miscommunications, can you elaborate on that at all? Are you able to speak on?
I mean, I was uncertain about what counted as an outside organization because I was like, I'm a student, but got that all figured out. So,
okay.
Can you speak a little bit about your determination to get young voters engaged, especially in this midterm election?
Absolutely. So this is a really important midterm election, which I know is something you hear a lot about a lot of elections, period. But obviously there's a tense political climate right now, and I think a lot of people are angry. And I mean, there's just been so many events leading up to this specifically. So we've got the Kavanaugh hearing, and we've got shootings galore, and I think people are paying attention. And so to give them, millennials and Gen Z now, the opportunity to use their voice and speak up on those issues in a way that's productive was, but that's what motivated me personally.
And you mentioned a lot of these issues, these current day issues, the political landscape, the social landscape that sort of impacts this decision. What are some of the questions? I'm sure some of these students have a lot of questions whenever it comes to the things that are happening in the world now.
Yeah, I didn't really deal with too many students asking a lot of questions beyond how do I get to the polling location and, like, can I register in this state? If I'm from this state, how long do I have to be here? Because we're a legally nonpartisan organization. We are progressive, but as a super PAC, standing as a super PAC, we cannot endorse any specific candidates or any party. So if people had questions, I could just explain to them what the issue was, which, very seldom happened. I was like, here's the registration form, and they'd fill it out. I'd take it to the courthouse, and that would be that. But we also have a lot of volunteers, so a lot of freshmen this year was the thing for me. I had a lot of freshmen that would come out on campus with me, and that's another way of getting them engaged and excited because they get to see their work in action as political activists.
Now, you mentioned a lot of freshmen were engaged in the process. This, I'm sure, has been very transparent to voter turnout. Do you believe so?
Oh, absolutely. So I kind of worked between Carnegie Mellon and Point Park throughout the semester, and then today was really after we got the shuttle situation all figured out. I was primarily on Carnegie Mellon's campus, and the lines they have a polling location on campus. So the lines were out the door, and I happened to be at the Epiphany Church, which is the polling location for campus addresses at Point Park, and I happened to be there like 9:30, and it was pretty dead. But people were sending me Snapchats and Facebook videos, etc., throughout the day, just to be like, this is how full this is. Like, people keep saying I waited in line for an hour and a half, and both of those are primarily students. So Carnegie Mellon makes up that, if not the entire polling location on campus for them, the majority of it, and then Point Park is a lot of, the Epiphany Church is a lot of Point Park students and Duquesne students. So,
and when we're talking about that voter turnout there, you mentioned obviously high rates of people there today. Did you talk enough to people to know what the early voter turnout was among the students that you're working with?
Meaning like early in the day?
No. Early voting. Whenever people were able to vote early, I believe it ended on the 3rd for most here in most states, actually. Was there a big difference in turnout?
We didn't really discuss. So our goal is mostly regarding conventional voting, like in person. We don't necessarily discourage absentee ballot voting, but if you can register where you're at, it just makes the most sense because it's the easiest way to do it. So we didn't really talk much or even at all about early voting, and even discussion about absentee ballots were pretty minimal.
Okay. Anything else that you want to share just about your mission with Next Gen? Your mission specifically too.
Yeah, I in the 2016 election, I woke up I had stayed up all night and I watched whatever that was happen, and I knew I had to do something, and I was kind of sick of just arguing with people on Facebook and in person. I definitely argued with people in person, but I was like, I need to be able to do something that's going to make a difference, because me complaining on Facebook is not really doing much, and to be able to be paid to, pursue a passion of mine was really a really cool experience, and I hope to continue to work in this field.
Awesome, Ian, thank you so much
for
joining
us.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, we do want to go ahead and throw this over to our reporter, Kiera Fry, who met with people and was discussing the Black Lives Matter movement. And on July 1st, protesters gathered at this intersection demanding justice for Antoine Rose II. That's something that you'll hear from Kiera Fry. We're going to throw that over there now.
Live from Point Park University's Center for Media Innovation, Election Night 2018 will return after the break.
The show that starts
on July
Friday
1st, protesters gathered at this intersection demanding justice for Antoine Rose II.
Rose was an unarmed black teen who was shot and killed by an East Pittsburgh police officer as he fled from a traffic stop in mid-June. Protesters took to the streets in the following weeks, shutting down Penn Avenue and other major roads as they called for the officer to be brought to justice and stressed that Black Lives Matter. The chair of the Department of Africana Studies at the University of Pittsburgh recently wrote on the movement and believes the Black Lives Matter movement has the power to influence change.
It's definitely making an impact, but what you find is when people say Black Lives Matter, and that's anybody, whether they're black or they're other ethnicities, when they say Black Lives Matter, they're not saying validity, dehumanization, resilience, systematically, intentionally targeted for demise. And so I think Black Lives Matter would be strengthened if we start using the language that's in the kind of the manifestos of Black Lives Matter.
In response to the Antoine Rose shooting, local news stations reported protests throughout downtown Pittsburgh, including at the intersection of Grant Street and the Boulevard of the Allies and in Market Square.
I was happy to see the mobilization. I was happy to see downtown streets shut down and people being vocal and taking advantage of space and taking over space in the public domain to discuss this and to get to the finer points of what this means and what this continues to mean.
In September, the East Pittsburgh police officer Michael Rossfeld had a status hearing. He is being charged with homicide for shooting Rose 3 times. There has not yet been a trial date set for the case.
For UView Television, I'm Kiara Fry.
Now, Kiara, I want to talk a little bit with you about the breakdown of the misuse of Black Lives Matter. Can you go a little bit more into detail on that?
Yes, I actually think that Christelle Temple, who I spoke to from the University of Pittsburgh, did a really good job of explaining this misunderstanding that when a lot of people hear the phrase Black Lives Matter, they want to counter that with All Lives Matter, as if the Black Lives Matter movement is saying that Black lives matter more than other lives. And yes, all lives matter, but if you look at the language at the center of the Black Lives Matter movement, the Black Lives Matter website actually defines the movement as an ideological and political intervention in a world where Black lives are systematically and intentionally targeted for demise. So she said that when you look at that language, you can see that not all lives are being targeted for demise as Black lives are being. And you can see that throughout history, how a lot of people have been targeted for their race and discriminated against. And it continues to be an issue, but people see it more as saying that Black lives are above other lives.
Now, Kiara, you mentioned that as millennials, we love to have our voices heard. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about how seriously and how important it is for millennials' voices to be heard, as some of the more of the influencers of the Antoine Rose protest were of the young generation.
Yes, they were, and it's definitely important for millennials to get out there and have their voices heard because according to a Pew Research Center study that was recently done in the first half of 2018, they said that millennials were projected to be the largest generation by the end of 2019. So they have the diversity and the numbers to make the change that they've been hoping for.
Now, I do want to turn it over to Royce pretty quickly because I know that you had covered the Antoine Rose protest after he was shot in the beginning of June. Can you tell me a little bit about the observable detail and just what the expression was from Pittsburghers at that moment?
Absolutely. Well, I think that Kiara really did hit it right on the head with that, and that is the amount of young protesters that were out there. You did see a significant amount of youth out there. I want to specifically reference one of the protest leaders, Christian Carter. He went to Woodland Hills High School. He was from the Wilkinsburg area, and he really did spearhead a lot of this movement among our generation. You saw a lot of familiar faces there as well. I have to tell you, I was at multiple protests. I mean, they really did take over this city over this past summer in a capacity that I don't think we've ever seen anything like it really in our city. You see things like this happen other places, but specifically here, I've never seen anything to this capacity. You saw a lot of familiar faces. I saw this protester, I'm talking about this young protester, Christian Carter, saw him at just about every one. Definitely a lot of youth there, so I think that Kiara definitely described it right on point.
And when we return, we'll check in with our media partners at WPPJ who are bringing you up to speed on all things election on the radio.
And we'll be answering those questions you want the answers to using hashtag PointParkVotes. We'll also be taking a look at the latest results from key races. We'll be right back.
Live from Point Park University's Center for Media Innovation, Election Night 2018 will return after the break.
I know just the trick
bippity boppity boop. Much better. Guys, Samir Nefsky, and I'm outside of the Benedum Center right now. So in just a few moments, we're going to go inside the Benedum Center to talk to Trevor Dion Nicholas, who plays the genie in Disney's Aladdin. I'm Samir Nefsky giving you the theatrical scoop for the Berg. Hey guys, so I'm now inside the Benedum Center with Trevor Dion Nicholas, who plays the genie in Disney's Aladdin. What a treat that was to attend. But before the show started, I had the chance to go backstage and talk with one of the talented members of the cast, Bianca Horn. Let's take a look.
You're watching Election Night 2018 on UView Television.
Guest speakers, rock, hip-hop, and Britney Spears. Catch us on Friday at 10 a.m. on WPPJradio.com or the TuneIn app.
Good evening, world. Good evening, Point Park University and beyond. That intense music means it's our midterm election night show. My name is Alex Popichak, and if you're just tuning in, I'm joined in studio by the one and only Robert Berger.
Hello, everybody.
We are also joined in studio by our statistician, Mr. Dennis McDermott.
That's me.
And our first guest of the night, a good friend of ours here, Mr. Jordan Slobodinsky. How are you tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good.
And so could you give folks that aren't familiar with you a little bit of a bio? Who are you?
Well, I am a student at Point Park who studies journalism. I'm heavily into politics a lot. I read about it. My minor is in poli-sci. And I'm pretty much just your average stressed out college kid.
So,
and you write for the Globe
and I
in
write for the
opinion
Globe,
section,
yes,
which
yes.
is pretty much why you were here.
Yeah.
So, if you could, bring us a little bit of insight into your political journey, because that's been. As your friend on Facebook, I'm just fascinated to see, how where do you stand politically, my man?
I mean,
before you do that, I loved watching the 2016 transition of Jordan Slobodinsky's political agenda.
So okay, now
So
we're
now
talking.
give that the rundown.
Now we're talking insider here. Let's bring our listeners up to speed. Jordan Slobodinsky joining us in studio. I asked the question of what is your political journey. So
it all started when I was born.
Well, I mean, that's a good place to start.
I was raised in a kind of conservative household. My dad's always been a conservative, but he did not live in my house. Like, he lived half an hour from me. But I spent probably 10 days a month with him, and I grew up in a very conservative household there. And then when I came home, my mom kind of leans in the middle, and every friend I had was conservative and was all red.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I grew up, was to not be a liberal, because liberal is heresy.
Yes.
And so I grew up thinking that way, and into the 2016 election, I was blind red, did not do any research. If the word Democrat came up, it was kind of like
it was an instant no for you then.
Yeah. The color blue might as well have just been poison to me.
Oh man.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way of looking at things. But where are you originally from?
Lock Haven, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, middle of the state.
Yep,
Very
middle
red.
of the state.
Very red over there.
Very, very red. And then after the 2016 election, about literally a month into Trump's administration, I said, "Oh well, I did a bad thing."
But
what exactly was it that Trump had done to make you switch your views?
It was the travel ban, 100%.
Okay.
It was the first attempted travel ban in January 2017. That was the turning point for me, where I was like, "Oh, this guy's not a good person. I made a mistake."
So, that brings us to today. Are you registered to vote, first off?
Yep.
And second, are you a party affiliate that you would be willing to talk about on air? Or?
Well, I mean, right now I'm affiliated with the Republican Party.
Okay.
I was honestly too lazy to change it, but
do you want to change it?
Absolutely,
Okay.
100%. There is no bone in my body that remains Republican by any sense of the imagination.
Now, I'm really curious, not to put you on the spot here,
It's
but
okay.
what does that mean? What does being a Republican versus being a not Republican mean?
So the mindset I had going in to 2016 was I thought I was a very mild Republican. I thought I was somebody that could talk to Democrats and say, well, this isn't, you're thinking of the stereotypical redneck, gun waving, what's that flag? Or
the Confederate flag?
Yeah, Confederate flag.
About?
Yeah. Confederate flag waving guy. And it turns out there's not a whole lot of difference there. I mean, if you're a Republican, that seems to be almost exactly 100% what you are.
Now, are you speaking from a place of observation, or are you speaking from a place of how you grew up, or like
it's
how do you make that assessment?
It's a lot of observation, like you said, but I mean, I witnessed a lot of Confederate flags. I've witnessed a lot of racism from Republicans. I've witnessed a lot of Republicans that don't even realize they're being racist. And that was the big turning point for me too. Was like, wow, I am sounding like a racist.
Now, coming from Lock Haven to like downtown Pittsburgh for college, what kind of a change was that like for you, especially during the election process and everything that we had witnessed like our freshman year back then?
So, I went to high school with two people that weren't white. There were two people in my school that weren't white. There was Wesley Jolly and there was Tatiana Abdullah. Those are the only people that were of color. So I thought that their experience justified the rest of the country's experience. And when their experiences were very good in modern America. And then I came downtown Pittsburgh. I come to school. My life gets a little diversity in it, really.
For the first time. Really.
Yeah, first time I realized, wow, this isn't all like hunky-dory. Like people are struggling and not meeting ends meet. And that's kind of where it was like, wow, this is just the wrong mindset to be in when I'm thinking conservative.
Now, if you're just joining us, we're talking with Jordan Slobodinsky, who is the opinions editor at the Globe currently, and we're talking about his political journey to this point. So, did you vote today or via absentee?
No, I voted. I'm actually registered in Allegheny County
Okay.
because I knew when coming to school that I was going to be at school for both elections.
So my question to you is, are there any issues that were brought up that were particularly pertinent to your vote today?
So one of the big things that I have been advocating for since 2017, late 2016, has been gun control.
Okay.
Even when I was a registered Republican, even when I affiliated myself with the Republican Party, I have been pushing for this for years. I've tried to contact my representatives, and they kind of brush it aside every time. You try to bring up a gun issue to a Republican, and it's almost waved away completely. They will move to the mental health care talk right away.
You said when you bring it up to a Republican?
Yes.
Or, okay.
And so that was a big reason for me to vote blue today.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where is your stance?
I'm a huge.
Yeah, do you own guns, or have you in the past?
I've never owned a gun. I've shot some guns up on a mountain with my friend when I was younger. I've told myself I would like to not touch a gun again in my lifetime. And I never really understood the fascination with them. I can understand them in terms of hunting, and of course in self-defense to an extent. But I never understood the fascination of getting a bump stock or having an assault rifle or having military-grade equipment in a civilian home. And I grew up in an area where I would watch fathers and grandfathers pull out their AR-15 out of a I don't know what those cases are called, but they're very they're packaged really tight and they have the foam in them so they don't damage the gun.
Like the hard cases?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was kind of eye-opening for me because I don't really want military-grade weapons in civilian society. So
Now, while you were in Lockhaven and affiliating yourself as a Republican, what was your opinion on them then? Has it really shifted since you've been in college, or have you always felt that same way about guns?
I mean, I've always been okay with them for hunting purposes.
Yes.
I mean, I've eaten deer meat, and it's really good.
It is.
It is very good. And I really have no issue with that. I just take issue with a lot of these people who own multiple guns, who will own somewhere upwards. I think the one person I knew, he owned 8 guns, 9 guns. And it's a sport to them for sure, but it's a dangerous thing when I notice that some of them aren't locked up, some of them are locked up. It depends on the household you're in.
Yes.
And there seems to be no consistency on safety regulation with them.
So your vote today went thinking that along those lines of that kind of. Are you? Is that a major? I mean, obviously it's a major issue for you. I'm just getting a note from Mr. McDermott here that we've got some data to look at. You're listening to live radio. You're listening to WPPJ, broadcasting across the world at WPPJradio.com. And Mr. McDermott, what say you?
I have to say, reporting for Pennsylvania, we do have some results running in, but Bob Casey has been won. It's been confirmed by 2 sources that Bob Casey has won the Senate spot for the state of Pennsylvania.
In the name of transparency, who are your sources?
In the name of transparency, we have CNN and the New York Times both reporting this, and I'm sure I could find some more sources if I started looking around for it.
So based off of the data that we have here, that's with 41.45% of the vote in Allegheny County, and statewide, it's a little bit slower. We have 660 out of 9,100 precincts, or about 7%. But that data is Mr. Casey, the incumbent, is polling at like 66% to his immediate challenger Lou Barletta, who's polling at 32.4%. This is again the statewide data, so I mean that's a pretty commanding lead, I would say.
And the reason it's been called.
Welcome back. A common theme emerging from this election and this show is the red wave versus the blue wave, or Republicans versus Democrats. But one third face it to examine both the general and the midterm election is third-party candidates and members of those parties. Here to discuss the third party and the issues that matter to them is Point Park student Brennan Burke. Brennan, thank you for joining us.
Problem.
Now, I wanted to ask you, we often do get caught up in the 2 main political parties of America, the Democratic versus Republican. So can you explain some of the views of the Libertarian Party?
So the Libertarian Party, it's very close to classical liberalism in the sense of right to private property, laissez-faire capitalism, so government limited interaction with our lives, the economy, and pretty much all aspects, and people being able to control their lives as they see fit.
Now, I know that you used to be the president of Young Libertarians for America, the Point Parks chapter. Can you explain what this organization does?
Okay, so Young Americans for Liberty, it has no affiliation with the Libertarian Party, but it does skew libertarian in their views. I am still currently the president, but I am stepping down at the end of this semester because it is my senior year, and I do want to focus on graduating. That's my biggest thing right now, and I'm trying to pass it off to one of the other members so the club can keep on going. But basically, we're here to just promote free speech, activism, getting the conversation talking, talk about things such as gun control, things like individual rights, voter ID laws, all different sorts of topics. Like we were talking about Brett Kavanaugh a couple weeks ago and how that affected us, and like how, we're going to take that and, talk about it in the future with all these different issues coming up.
I want to ask you too, we were talking before break about that political divide right now, very split political climate. Where does the Libertarian Party fit into this split?
The Libertarian Party fits like right in the middle of it, actually. I mean, the Libertarian, Party, the ideology can appeal to many different people. It encompasses a lot of different views that a lot of people can agree with. It's just a lot of people don't hear about or know about the candidates that are running under the Libertarian Party and their platform. but they're very anti-war, which is something the Democrats can get behind. They're very limited government, which Republicans should be behind, but a lot of Republicans don't seem to be very small government anymore. But
now, I do want to ask you, I know we had already touched base on it a little bit about the Libertarian Party platforms, but a lot of people aren't familiar with the Libertarian Party at all. Can you just give us a further explanation of some of those big platforms like gun control?
So gun control, Libertarians are very for the Second Amendment. Some believe that citizens should have rights to all weapons that the military has, such as fully automatic. I'm not going to give my stance on that, but that's just one thing some Libertarians do view. They also want to end the drug war on all drugs. Also, like I said, limited or very no taxation, and especially income tax and things like that.
I mean, whenever we're talking about, I think one of the biggest things right now, especially in this race, is position on immigration. Where do you guys fit in there?
A lot of Libertarians are very open borders. A lot of people are very welcoming of immigrants. I myself am very open to this. I think it would be very beneficial for the country to have more immigration of any kind, really.
All right. Thank you so much, Brendan, for coming on.
Thanks, Brendan.
Yeah.
All right. Ahead after the break, we're going to be giving you guys more election coverage. Stay with us.
Live from Point Park University's Center for Media Innovation, Election Night 2018 will return after the break.
I know just the trick. Bippity, boppity, boop! Much better. Guys, Samir Nesby, and I'm outside of the Benedum Center right now. So in just a few moments, we're going to go inside the Benedum Center to talk to Trevor Dion Nicholas, who plays the genie in Disney's Aladdin. I'm Samir Nesby giving you the theatrical scoop for the Berg. Hey guys, so I'm now inside the Benedum Center with Trevor Dion Nicholas, who plays the genie in Disney's Aladdin. What a treat that was to attend. But before the show started, I had the chance to go backstage and talk with one of the talented members of the cast, Bianca Horn. Let's take a look.
You're watching Election Night 2018 on UView Television.
Nor am I.
All right, with midterm elections happening tonight, it's important to consider the issue of rising tuition and how it affects college education for students. And we're going to throw that over to our reporter right now, Marley Pinchak, who's going to break this down for you.
With the midterm elections happening tonight, it's important to consider the issue of rising tuition and how this affects college education for students. According to Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, from 2008 to 2017, tuition at public four-year colleges in Pennsylvania have increased by 23%.
I even have a friend that he doesn't really come from the best situation, and he did 2 years of school, and then he had to drop out because he couldn't afford it anymore. And it was kind of sad because he was like a really good kid, and I don't think something like that should ever really happen.
Students often wonder exactly where their tuition is being put to use.
I just never understand like where all the tuition money that I'm paying for goes. Like the things like books, I thought that books were included like in the whole thing, like my books would be paid for. But until I got to college, they're like, oh no, you're paying for tuition and books you do on your own. So I was like, okay, why am I paying all this money for books?
According to a 2016 Point Park publication of The Globe, President Hennigan discusses tuition increases for private colleges, saying, When we announce tuition increases, roughly half of that goes straight to financial aid. That is how the private sector of higher education in America prices tuition. The public schools don't do that. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not making any judgment on it.
So yes, the tuition may go up, but yet the financial aid dollars that are available to students also increase. So your word of paradox, I mean, I couldn't sit here and say, wow, that's not the right word that you want to use. I would say that it's not unfair to say it's a paradox, because it is kind of that we keep raising to raise. Again, it's one of those challenges in higher education that everyone is trying to figure out. Is there a solution to this?
On average, students are given 6 months after graduation until they have to start paying off their loans. But finding a job right out of college is not always a guarantee.
Within those 6 months, the idea is you should have enough ample amount of time, and fortunate for you in a sense if you're graduating or a student's graduating now, the economy is good. So it's a good time to get a job, and with the loan agency and the federal government saying by 6 months you should have a job and you should be able to be paying that back.
International students, we do not have the time that citizens do in order to pay the debts. And the only kind of help in my case that I've seen is through sports.
So this one's deep to left field. Goodbye. Richard Perez with an absolute bomb.
With the limitations, because I'm no longer eligible in order to play, so that's why the scholarship cut. I was like, oh, now what do I do? I'm waiting for a miracle, basically.
There are many cases where the cost of tuition prevents a student from attending their ideal college.
There have been some colleges I wanted to go to, but they're private and they don't give out many scholarships, and I automatically had to root off my list because I don't want to pay $75,000 every year.
Private schools, most in this day and age, the way higher education is, are very tuition dependent, which means that they're relying on students paying their tuition in order to keep the doors open. So yeah, we are between probably 93 and 95% tuition dependent. So we survive by you all as students paying your tuition dollars. The number of institutions who have closed their doors because they cannot survive any longer in this higher education market, I would say if we talk about this in the next couple of years, I may use the word crisis.
I come from a country where it basically became a dictatorship, and looking back in years, people really didn't care or take serious about elections, and once you have freedom, man, take care of it.
It's clear that the rise of tuition is getting out of hand for college students. And just like every other issue discussed in tonight's election, affordable college education is an issue that should not be taken lightly. Reporting from Point Park University in downtown Pittsburgh, I'm Marley Pinchak for UView.
All right, Marley, thank you. And you know what? When we talk about college debt and tuition, period, across the board, we're talking big money. Can you break down for us where some of this money goes?
Yes, Roy. So just like in households, higher education institutions need to cover the inflationary increases that happen every year. So this includes the basic bills paying for water, electric, heat bill, keeping up with the college campuses, and a big part of that goes straight into financial aid. Now that's the same with both of them. A big difference is, though, with private colleges, they do not get government funding like public colleges do. So they are very tuition dependent. So they get their money typically from, straight tuition, endowments, and donations.
Marley, some of our viewers don't even know the difference between what is a public university and a private university and how those two both use their money separately. Can you give us a little more information on that?
Yeah, so I kind of just touched on that briefly before. So they both use tuition dollars to pay for the renovation of college campuses. Like I said, renovating dorm rooms, renovating classrooms, and of course that a big part of that goes straight into financial aid, and they all pay the bills as well. So the strict difference between the two is that public colleges do get out-of-state taxes and private colleges do not.
Okay, and I've got to ask you here, can you break down for students here at Point Park specifically, where does their money go there? Break down the tuition payments for that.
Yes, so according to a 2018 Point Park publication of The Globe, the tuition increases from 2015 to 2016 school year to the 2016-2017 school year was 2.9%, which in history was the lowest it has been since Point Park opened their doors in 2003. Both the 2017 18 school year and the 2018-2019 school year both had a 3.9% increase, and this year specifically the traditional undergrads have an additional $1,120 added to their tuition bill.
Now, even though we're a small university, I know that we still have a decent population of, international students, and I know that sports scholarships are one thing that's really important for them to pay for their tuition. Can you go into detail about this?
Yeah, so just like any scholarship that you're granted, whether it be academic or athletic, it's an amazing thing because when that tuition bill rolls in, a significant portion of that is something that you do not have to pay for. So families are excited about that. Students are very happy about that. And basically how it works, so a high school athlete will play in one of their games, say football, for example. A college recruiter will potentially recruit them for their school team, and depending on their ability, how well they play the sport, they'll negotiate an amount of money for that student scholarship. So I had the chance to interview Richard Perez. He's an international student, and unfortunately his scholarship has been terminated. But while he was playing, basically it covered his whole ride. So now he's really in a sticky situation as to how he's going to get that money because of how significant that scholarship was in his case.
And Marley, quickly, I got to ask you, a word that jumped out to me during your piece was the word crisis. Dean Palo used that, sort of describing the future of private education. Can you describe to us, what does he mean whenever he says crisis?
So there are a lot of smaller private institutions that can't really keep up with the higher education market, and this is solely because private institutions depend on students' tuition dollars to open their doors. So with the tuition increases happening every single year, it acts as a threat for private institutions to keep their doors open. So that's what he meant by crisis.
All right, Marley, well, thank you again for being here, and we appreciate all your efforts that you've done for us on your reporting so far. Now, we do have some latest results on the results of the election. So Pennsylvania Tom Wolf and Bob Casey, which are both Democrats, are both taking early voter leads. For Casey is running for the Senate, and Tom Wolf is running for governor. As we're switching down to the Florida Panhandle, Florida's governor race, there is 98% reporting done so far. DeSantis, which is a Republican, is leading Andrew Gillum. They're roughly about the same, but DeSantis has about 50% of the vote, and Andrew Gillum has 48. And switching to one of the biggest election races so far this year, we'll switch to the state of Texas, and that is O'Rourke back in the lead. It is over Cruz with 49.8% of the vote. And Cruz right now has 49.5%. So it's a really tight race, and we're going to keep our eyes and find the latest on that for you. Royce, I know you have some more.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We're going to take it down to Virginia State right now. 88% reporting there. Tim Kaine, Democrat, he is coming in at 54.2%, and Stewart, his Republican challenger, at 44%. And that governor race, the gubernatorial race we've all been talking about really these past couple of days, is in Georgia. Brian Kemp is actually leading Stacey Adams in early voting. That's something that everybody has been talking about. A lot of controversy surrounding that race right now, with accusations of basically voter intimidation, all kinds of things. A very messy race there. Those are your latest results for that. And in the West Virginia Senate, two popular names that you may have heard of, Joe Manchin and Patrick Morrisey. President Trump has been campaigning for him. 51.9% for Joe Manchin right now. That is the Democratic candidate. And then 43.8% Patrick Morrisey. That's the Republican candidate. That's the one that President Trump has been backing, campaigning for. 50% reporting on that one as well. And this is actually going to be one of those big indicators whenever we talked earlier about the referendum against Trump, his agenda. Morrisey is one of those people that has been backing Trump. He's one of those candidates that President Trump Trump said a vote for Morrissey is a vote for me. He is very pro-Trump. He's pro-Trump on immigration policy and everything else along those lines. Manchin has a sort of similar viewpoints with Trump's position on immigration. He sort of shares some similar views there. So this is what we're talking about when we say that referendum on Trump. This is the race that you're going to want to follow. And on the other side of the break, we'll check in with our partners at WPPJ as they bring you results and interviews throughout the night.
Plus, we'll break down the complexities of immigration and how that has impacted some voters tonight. We'll also sit down with Vanessa's Vivas to talk about student visas and the complex immigration debate.
And keep sending us your questions using hashtag PointParkVote. We'll answer your questions throughout the night from social media. We'll be right back.
Live from Point Park University's Center for Media Innovation, Election Night 2018 will return after the break.
Tonight on Newsnight, we attempt to make a promo. That and more, next. Good evening and welcome to Newsnight. It is a day. I am an anchor. Here's some news. Now over to weather.
Look at all this weather!
Thanks, weather person. Now about an in-depth story.
Thanks, Anchor. Why do we have a story that's in-depth and possibly local?
Great, thanks. How about sports? Do we have sports? Sports are certainly happening, and here's a graphic to prove it.
Wow, what a graphic. That's your news tonight, and I'm an anchor.
Getting hope today!
Hi, we're here to get hope today.
Each year, 2.7 million adoptable dogs and cats are euthanized in the U.S. According to the Humane Society of the United States, the amount of euthanized animals can be diminished if more consumers considered adoption rather than purchasing pets. All animals deserve hope for a happy home.
Come here, girl.
Be that hope for your next four-legged friend. Visit your local shelter for a chance at hope. Bring home hope.
You're watching Election Night 2018 on UView Television.
And that is the reason that people are giving for going out today.
The national discourse has been very much wrought with what is happening at a federal level and what that means on Main Street. And it's just interesting to watch from an overall perspective how this pans out and what your turnout numbers are going to end up being. Now stand by for a couple of seconds. And if you're just joining us here at WPPJ, we are in studio with Brian Partika, who, you gave off your resume earlier. Can you do that again for us? Explain, you're a political science and journalism double major, but you also have some political experience behind you.
Yeah, absolutely. 2 summers ago, I worked for Congressman Tim Ryan on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and I got to work with a lot of Republicans and Democrats, got to co-sponsor a lot of bills for veterans education, veterans wellness, just help support veterans, especially in the Youngstown, Ohio area where I'm from and where Congressman Tim Ryan represents, Democrat from Ohio's 13th District. It was just a really valuable experience, especially in a state like Ohio where you have a Republican and a Democrat senator. The Democrat, Sherrod Brown, just got reelected about an hour ago. So he has another 6 years in term. So it was just a really valuable experience to me just to be in the District of Columbia and learning the ropes of how politics works.
So you were in D.C. working for Tim Ryan?
Yes.
So what was that experience like?
Well, it was a lot of talking. I got to talk to a lot of his constituents, a lot of people who voted for him, a lot of people who did not vote for him. And he was a very powerful congressman. He ran against Nancy Pelosi for the Democratic Speaker of the House, the minority leader at the time. And he did lose. However, he was definitely on the news a lot. And every time he was on the news, whether it be Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, and he was on there a lot. And he still is to this day. we would get an influx of phone calls and just people complaining about, oh, he said this, oh, global warming this, oh, social issue this, and you just had to talk to them. And that's not always the easiest thing, especially when I didn't always get to see Tim Ryan in his office, and I didn't always get to talk to him. But you get to hear all these issues coming in from people who lived in his district and people who lived out of his district. We definitely got a lot of people who came and called in from California, Nancy Pelosi's district, and they were either complaining or saying, oh, we want her out, we like Tim Ryan. So it was just a lot of talking.
Now, was there an inflection point for you where you decided that politics was something you were interested in? I mean, this is 2 years ago that you were an intern, and you're a journalism and poli-sci double major. Was there an inflection point for you where you're like, you know what, I want to get involved with politics?
Yeah, I definitely think the inflection point was the 2016 election. It was the second semester of my freshman year. I was really big into the primaries, and I was not writing any candidate off by any means, but I was also not supporting anybody at any means at that given point. And I was just like, I want to learn about both parties. I want to learn about who's representing who, where these people are from, what they're for, how different they will be from Obama, how similar they will be to Obama, because I was a big fan of Barack Obama, many of his policies, and I just wanted to make sure I got the full understanding of the full story. So I wanted to double major in political science because I was very interested in it. And I think the inflection point was the election night of 2016 because we saw we all saw the polls with Hillary Clinton leading pretty much the entire time in any given poll you could name, and then Trump obviously pulling off the major upset. And I think that was a big inflection point for me. Then I was like, I'm doing the right thing at this point.
And we were talking earlier in the broadcast about where we get polling information and what that actually means in a broader sense. So have you been involved at all in this election cycle with any candidates? And if so, have you heard anything from the front lines?
I haven't been involved personally with any candidates, but I'm from Poland, Ohio, if you haven't heard that already. And Eric Ungaro, he is a candidate running for state representative in the state house in Ohio. And he's from my area. I went to school with his daughter, and I ended up getting a flyer received at my Pittsburgh apartment to vote for him, and it's just really interesting. Like this is a midterm, it's a non-presidential year, and I'm voting absentee ballot. And I went to high school with his daughter, and here I am in Pittsburgh getting information about a state representative candidate. This just shows you how big this election really is.
So, have you seen anything as far as turnout to indicate anything to you in today's contests, either locally or watching reports nationally?
Yeah, I've definitely been catching up on CNN. I've been watching CNN Live. I think they have really good election night coverage, and every time I turn it on, it seems like there's been more and more votes from different counties that really haven't voted in the past. I was able to scroll over to where they have Ohio at, and they've been getting record turnouts just in pretty much every county, which is really, really surprising because it's a state that went ruby red for Trump, 8.1% for above Hillary Clinton for Trump in 2016. So they've been getting a lot more votes than they have in years past. My congressman, Tim Ryan, he usually wins the district with about 70% of the vote, even though the northern part of his district is majority Republican. They ended up voting for him democratically, as they have always in the past. So it's been definitely an influx of more people voting in a midterm election in years past, especially where I'm from.
So, do you think that benefits either party to have more of a turnout, or is it just indicative of more people wanting to be involved in the process?
It's a little bit of both. I think it's indicative of people wanting to be involved. Definitely, you see people who support both sides and they don't vote. I know a ton of people who are Republican, a ton of people who are Democrat who just simply don't vote. And I think it's indicative of showing people want to be more involved. I do, in the long, big scheme of things, I do believe that it benefits the Democrats more so. Just because when you get more young people voting, you're going to get more Democrat, blue, whatever you want to call it, victories. And I think that we're seeing that now. We're seeing a lot of more young people voting. seeing a lot of college-age students voting. I mean, just check your Instagram or your Facebook or your Snapchat. Everybody's posting with their I voted sticker. Some people put their I voted sticker on their heads and come to class with it. So I mean, you just see it everywhere. I think it does help the Democratic Party more than the Republican Party in the long run.
Yeah, that's something we were talking about earlier about how social media, how just this more than any other election season, how we've seen so much involvement on social media online. Is that something you've seen like leading up to it as well?
Yeah, I've seen it everywhere. I mean, you could, if you're on Tinder, you could you're just scrolling through and it says, "Oh, go vote. Click here, swipe left to go vote." Or like you're just on Twitter and you see a random tweet from someone who never tweets and they're like, "Oh, I voted today," or everybody's Instagram story. You just see it all over social media, and you even see it in the ads that you see on Facebook or these other social medias, which I think is great. I think it's fine that they're promoting the vote, and I think they should do that more often.
Yeah, and we've been seeing it a lot and in waves. Like when registration was coming up, it was register here on all of these ads, and then leading up to it, it was this is voting day, find your polling place, and like just so many resources it would link you to find where your polls are. And it seems like having that available is really making people just want to get out there and vote more.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think it's nice that our Point Park University, they sent out an email, Dean Michael Gieske sent out an email saying, "Oh, the polling place is at Epiphany Church." And if you've ever been to Epiphany, it's only a 10-minute walk. It's a really easy, really safe walk up to Epiphany. Unfortunately, we couldn't get any Point Park shuttles to take us there this year.
Well,
I thought there were.
I know that there was. I'm sure there was.
I saw.
Yeah, I'm sure that I don't know all. I don't know. I don't know everything.
Fact check you on that. Yeah,
Please do, because I don't know everything. I don't know the rundown on it. But I was just happy to see that our school cared enough to at least send us an email. Oh, here's where the polling places are if you want to go.
So, basically everything that we've seen in the reports today have shown high levels of turnout, and you say that supports the Democrats, and so yeah, we'd like to thank you for joining us, Brian. You have a very fascinating take based off of your experience here, both as a journalism major and poli-sci double major, and so thank you for sharing your insight with us.
All right, thank you guys. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely, and we're getting more and more results throughout the evening here on WPPJ, yeah, we've got 81% of Allegheny County is reporting in at this juncture, and I'm looking at the state data, and we're just refreshing that here. Any word from our statistician in the corner?
Regarding Pennsylvania right now?
Yeah.
I'm not seeing a whole lot of results coming from Pennsylvania that have been confirmed by multiple sources. We're more looking at the same ones we have been looking at. CNN likes to be really early and try and predict early, but sometimes that backfires on them. So I'm just not going to say anything so it doesn't backfire
Outstanding.
on us.
We've got 34.7.
And welcome back. Perhaps one of the biggest discussions surrounding this election and the political landscape across the board is immigration. During his campaign trail, President Trump was a major advocate for stricter immigration policy. Under the Trump regime, the country has seen numerous changes in policy, including the banning of nationals from 8 Muslim countries, the canceling of deferred action for childhood arrivals, and most recently, the president is promising the cancellation of birthright citizenship through an executive order. According to the university fact sheet, international students make up 4% of the student population here at Point Park. Joining us now in the studio is sophomore Vanessa Vivas. Vanessa, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Now, Vanessa, I know that we were talking a little bit about before the break and before we started our show back again, that you mentioned that you're seen as an ambassador. Can you tell us a little bit about that, please?
Sure. Where I grew up, which was Qatar, and Venezuela and Qatar, I moved from Venezuela when I was 8, and then I grew up in an international environment in Qatar. I went to an international British school and then an international American school. So I was definitely exposed to a lot of different cultures and a lot of diversity, and it was just part of my life. And I didn't realize how big of a responsibility I had until I moved here. And I realized that everyone that I'm surrounded by is from PA. Nothing wrong with that. I just think that it was a culture shock coming here and seeing that no one really had the same background as I did. And so it's interesting to be able to represent multiple facets of society. So a woman, a Latina, an immigrant, and an immigrant from a Muslim country who lived in the Middle East. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that, and people don't usually see that when they first look at me.
And when you talk about those differences, when you mentioned that culture shock, right? What are some of the challenges that you face? Have you faced discrimination here? If so, would you mind sharing that with us?
Sure. I think that it's interesting because it's all very relative, and sometimes it even comes down to being superficial, because I'm very white passing. People don't look at me and go, oh, you're an immigrant, or you're ethnic or brown or anything. What's interesting is that I remember specifically an incident that happened at a COPA event where there was a family picture taken, and it was the people of color family. And my roommate was an African American, and she came up to me, and we were hanging out, and then this other African American student came up to us and said, hey, we're taking a family picture. And I was like, great, we're gonna go do it. And then he looked at me and goes, oh, no, not you. No, it's a family picture. And I was very taken aback, and I said, I don't know what that means. Am I a person of color? Am I not? So I felt a little bit of kind of discrimination or marginalization there, because it felt like I didn't know what my identity was. I think one of my biggest struggles is that I struggle with identity issues. I don't really look ethnic, but I don't really look white, so it's an interesting thing to experience and to navigate.
I really want to ask you on that, was there ever a time whenever you're experiencing things like this and you say people don't necessarily relate you to as a minority, right? Mm-hmm. Was there ever a time when you experienced this and thought to yourself, you know what, I give up. I'm just going to identify as white. I'm not going to identify as a minority. Was there ever a moment like that for you?
I think it's interesting because I can't ever detach myself from who I am. At the same time, sometimes I wish I could, because I become a token international student or a token Latina or a token immigrant. Like the amount of jokes that I've made with my friends about being an immigrant and getting green card married, they're jokes and they're funny in the moment. At the same time, I know people sometimes take them too far, and it becomes, I wish I could disassociate myself with this label. So it's definitely a struggle, but when it comes down to it, I will never forget my upbringing, and that's always going to be a part of me, and my family's always a part of me, and especially in Latino culture, family is such an important thing. It's one of the things we value the most. So I can never detach myself from that, and I just need to realize that stuff like this can be petty, and that I have to just move on, get past it. I'm an ambassador, I'm strong, I'm here, and I'm ready to work.
It's a really powerful statement. I think that there are some people out there who really need to identify with that and hear that. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for coming on the show with us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Well, you guys, on the other side of the break, UU reporters hit the polls earlier today to see just who is out there. We'll have Andrew Brinker's report next.
And plus, we'll break down the debate around Planned Parenthood and Roe versus Wade.
And keep sending in those questions. We'll answer posts using the hashtag PointParkVotes throughout the night. We'll be right back.
Live from Point Park University's Center for Media Innovation, Election Night 2018 will return after the break.
The show that starts your Friday mornings has returned with both familiar and new faces. Daybreak hosts Taylor Fife and Delaney Bomas are bringing you the latest updates in Pittsburgh and Point Park news. We also have a variety of talent on our free segments. Whether it be singing, dancing, or indeed egg smashing. Start your mornings with us at Daybreak on UView at UView Television.
Hi, we're here to get hope today.
Each year, 2.7 million adoptable dogs and cats are euthanized in the U.S. According to the Humane Society of the United States, the amount of euthanized animals can be diminished if more consumers considered adoption rather than purchasing pets. All animals deserve hope for a happy home.
Come here, girl.
Be that hope for your next four-legged friend. Visit your local shelter for a chance at hope. Bring home hope.
What concerns do you have about the university, student life, safety, food service? Send us an email to studentconcerns@pointpark.edu or stop by our office on the 7th floor of the Student Center. You can also attend our weekly open meetings on Mondays at 3:15. Follow us on social media at USG_PPU for more. the United Student Government, by the students, for the students.
Broadcasting from the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, you're listening to the sound of Point Park University, WPPJ 670 AM.
You're watching Election Night 2018 on UView Television.
And at Point Park University, one of the most popular projects for the school communications students is sending their students to the polls. A journalistic and writing and editing 151 class, Helen Fallon's class, sent her students to the polls to discuss and find out what the demographic was, who was voting, who was there, and more importantly, who were they voting for? Royce?
That's right. And you know what? I'm interested to hear some of these responses, especially hear from some people of the younger generation and what their decisions are, what they're thinking, what they're talking about. Let's take it away.
It's the day students all over the country have been waiting for, Election Day 2018. And the overwhelming mood? Excitement, as students from Point Park University headed to the polls to get their hands on one of these. Students woke up early this morning, but not just to get to class. Instead, hundreds, maybe more than ever before, headed to the Epiphany Catholic Church in downtown Pittsburgh, the designated polling place for those registered to vote on campus. Voting is a student tradition at Point Park University, but this year that tradition undertook a drastic change. Voter registration across the country has increased dramatically in the past months, thanks in large part to youth voters. The nationwide youth voter movement has managed to mobilize one of America's most powerful generations. According to data produced by TargetSmart, a Democratic research firm based out of Washington, voter turnout rates among 18 to 29-year-olds have increased by 4% across the country. Leading the way is Pennsylvania, who has seen their youth voter registration increase by 10% this election year.
Oh, definitely. Everybody's been posting about it and talking about it in classes, about going out to vote. This is the most excitement I've seen about anything political that isn't, negative in classes in a long time.
I mean, I run into people all the time and they're like, go vote. So yeah, it's very big on advocating for voting.
While the youth voter movement is beneficial for the country, some students are saying that it may even be bringing the campus closer together.
There's such a feeling of involvement with everyone because, they feel the pressure of everything that's happening. And I think for the first time, there's really a feeling of responsibility and empowerment going through the students.
Cynicism of the democratic process has long been an excuse for citizens to avoid voting. However, students this year are beginning to take a more optimistic approach.
Huge portion of the chunk of the population, and if we all come out and vote, whatever, political alignment we feel, then I think definitely we will make a difference.
Polls were open today from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., and results are expected to start rolling in shortly after 8 o'clock. From the Epiphany Catholic Church in downtown Pittsburgh, reporting for UView, I'm Andrew Brinker.
And welcome back. Now we're going to talk a little bit about gerrymandering, and this has been a new kind of issue that's been really popular within the last year. So gerrymandering is when a political party redraws their congressional districts on the congressional map in favor of their party. Now, gerrymandering was ruled unconstitutional in January of 2018, and this was especially particular, and it pertained especially, to the special election that was held versus Connor Lamb in the 18th district.
Right.
So basically, PA has only used the new map since it was drawn. They had a court case and it went through the court systems, and it was ruled that the PA legislators had to redraw the congressional map. So the new map has only been used, it was used in the primary elections, but this is really the first big midterm election that it's been used for, and I think that a lot of new congressmen will be elected from this.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that a lot of people are familiar with this topic, though? I mean, you mentioned it's a fairly new discussion. How do you see this sort of seeding itself into this election in particular? I'm sure that it has some sort of impact, right? I mean, what's your position on that?
Well, it's interesting that you asked me that. So last year in January and February, I went out on the street and I interviewed several people, probably about 10 or so, and I asked them, the first question I would ask them is, what is gerrymandering? And most people have no idea. It's something that's not always seen or not always heard of, especially because it's not a major party platform. And usually the party that's drawing it wants to keep their votes, wants to keep the higher number of legislators in favor of their party. So it was a big issue in the midterm election, but I don't believe that it'll really be a big issue for the midterm. It's kind of been secluded, and you haven't really heard much about it since the midterm election, the special election.
And I also want to kind of dive into sort of a different topic here. I know that you've also done some research about women's rights, and you had some things to say about that. Obviously, that's a really big deal on the table in this election. You actually see in the polls a lot of women are getting out there and voting. And we are in such a social climate with, the Time's Up movement. We're talking, in the sexual harassment in Hollywood, in the workplace. It's all about the women. For me personally, I think it's really all about the women in this election for the most part. You do see a lot of talks about women and their rights. Tell us where this fits in this election. Go ahead and talk about it for me.
Okay, so in 1973, Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court ruled that an abortion was considered as a fundamental right underneath the Due Process Clause. And this has really been popular with former Congressman Tim Murphy, who was taken out of his seat because he was in favor of his mistress getting an abortion. So this kind of has transitioned between what women's views are and what the legislators' views are. So while many Democratic women have taken their frustrations with the Trump administration by the reins, and they began to run for office, and mostly in the midterm elections, many fundamental women's rights are still at risk. And the United Nations commented in June, quote, that no country has successfully eliminated discrimination against women or achieved full equality, end quote. Reproductive choices are under fire with the proposed domestic gag rule, which would ban any healthcare facility that receives federal funding from advising on or providing abortions. Women also face the issues of sexual harassment at work. Trump rolled back the Fair Play and Safe Workplaces executive order in 2017, which in part aimed to help sexual harassment victims at federal companies from being forced into secret arbitration proceedings with their employers. Due to cutbacks of the Trump administration, when rolling back the Fair Play and Safe Workplaces executive order, this proposed a new women. Human Rights Watch notes as a result, quote, large employers and federal contractors will not be required to provide disaggregated information about employees' compensation to civil rights enforcement agencies, end quote. And healthcare cuts could cut supporting domestic violence counseling, which has been because being a survivor could be seen as a pre-existing condition. The National Women's Law Center explains in its analysis of Trump's proposed 2019 budget that national funding for women's health is under a serious threat. It could, quote, decimate the Medicaid program, which not only provides access to vital care for over 17 million nationwide women enrolled in the program, but also supports nearly 4.4 million health sector jobs held by women nationwide.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's definitely a lot of information that I think a lot of people really weren't aware about, especially along the lines of healthcare, right? I think that that's something that a lot of people weren't familiar with when you associate the topic of women's rights. And I know that you also had something on Roe versus Wade that you wanted to discuss as well.
Yes, so Roe versus Wade was a Supreme Court case in 1973 that it ruled abortion as a constitutional right underneath the Due Process Clause. So transitioning, a lot of people have been concerned about this with the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh and other liberal and conservatives. That's kind of an issue they're very divided on. Most people are in favor of things like birth control, and they find that is something that they can agree on. But abortion is not always an issue that they can. So in a Gallup poll recently reported that 66% of people actually are in favor of abortion. And while both liberals and conservatives, like I said, rank birth control as acceptable, there's not always a clear definition of what else they can join in together.
Right, I know in West Virginia specifically, I believe it's called Amendment 1 on their ballots, and that's really talking about, do you support abortion and some of the things that I believe that it's actually doing. I'm not a West Virginia resident, so I didn't really get to look too closely at the ballots, but from what I've heard and what I understand about it, it's would basically remove some of the solidified rights to abortion that women have current day, and so basically it would eliminate some of the protections that they have as far as abortion is concerned. And so it's definitely something I think a lot of people are going to seeing on their ballots. It's something that a lot of people are talking about, and it's definitely a big deal on the table here in this election.
Now, Rose, I know that you mentioned women's rights, but one thing that I was really surprised is not a lot of women are addressing women's rights. They want to appeal to the bigger demographic. So they're looking to the white supremacists. They're looking to strictly white candidates. They're looking for other interests and not really going with the route of women specifically.
And I wonder why that is. I mean, don't you find that sort of odd, right? It's not really as expected as you would think. So, all right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, sure. And on the other side of the break, we'll check in with our media partners at WPPJ as they cover the issues tonight.
Plus, we will get to some of those questions you want to know using hashtag #PointParkVotes.
And we'll break down the results and issues surrounding regional races. We'll be right back.
UView's Election Night 2018 live from the Center for Media Innovation will be back shortly.
Here at the halftime show, we take things very seriously. Despite being a new show, we rarely mess up. Ready, Nick? Wait. Oh no.
Okay, can we start over? Sorry.
I did not see it. I literally flipped it.
It's okay. It's okay. Trades off of. There's been a lot of trades this past off season. The Cleveland Cavaliers. Since it is a Valentine's Day episode, we of course have to talk proposals.
It's in black and white. Yeah.
This is my bad side.
Right.
Should I take my jacket? That's too much.
There we go. There we go.
Really great to see. And then
I'm Megan Masiosi.
And I'm Aaron Becker. I'm Jeff Dockham.
I'm Ellen Stanton.
I'm Nicole Pampena.
I'm Nicole Cost.
We'll see you next week.
The Point Park Sports Network, bringing you live coverage of Pioneer Athletics on Stretch Internet, the home of the River States Conference and the NAIA. Subscribe today for complete access to the Point Park volleyball, baseball, basketball, and soccer teams. Watch live and on-demand broadcasts, and don't miss a minute of Point Park Athletics. Head to pointparksports.com/live for broadcast listings. The Point Park Sports Network, your streaming home for Point Park Athletics.
Broadcasting from the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, you're listening to the sound of Point Park University, WPPJ 670 AM.
You're watching Election Night 2018 on UView Television.
Swanky from the Igloo on Thursdays. We promise it'll be a good time, so join us right here at noon on WPPJ.
Good evening, world, and Point Park University. You are listening to WPPJ, and you're listening to our election night coverage here on WPPJ. My name is Alex Popichak, and I'm joined in studio by Robert Berger, our statistician, Dennis McDermott, and joining us now in studio is Sam Morrison. And I'm going to reset that in a second here. And so if you are just tuning in, again, I'm Alex Popichak. I'm joined in studio by Robert Berger, our statistician of the evening, Dennis McDermott, who is having a field day tonight. And we are joined in studio by Sam Morrison. Sam, you joined me on this side of the table 2 years ago. You said to me right before we came on, you're wearing the sweater. Is it true that you were wearing the same sweater that you wore on our broadcast 2 years ago in the same spot?
Completely by coincidence. I was in a rush to get dressed in something vaguely presentable. I came from work. I went to vote today at work. I work as an EMT and took the ambulance to my polling station and hopped out, cast my vote, got back in service. So that was kind of fun.
I'm going to stop you right there. To folks that do not know you,
yes.
How do you introduce yourself?
One of my hobbies is collecting titles. I picked up another one, by the way. You'll be excited. So I'm currently at the Reverend Sir Samuel J. Morrison, Esquire, PI, NREMT, BFRO Field Investigator. That's right.
I would ask you to break that down, but I don't think we have enough time in the show.
Oh, it's quick. I used to host a show with WPPJ called Squatch Watch, where I would talk about Bigfoot. and I am now an official Bigfoot investigator for
Wow.
the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, which is a lot of fun. It's a great way to spend a weekend.
I didn't know you could become an official Bigfoot investigator.
Oh yeah, there's an exam you have to take. It's 10 questions.
All right, that is
But
something
yes.
I learned tonight. I mean, election night is teaching us all stuff.
But last election though, I'm having some deja vu. Last election, I remember I was wearing this sweater because it was chilly. Different shirt though, so we don't know which is cursed, the shirt or the sweater. And I was actually sitting in that seat. We switched engineering and hosting for that segment, and just idle conversation. I peeked over at the map and saw Pennsylvania turned light red, which means it was leaning Republican, and it had been fairly solid dark blue for most of the night because the major cities had reported, but the central state had not checked in yet. And it switched, and depending on who you ask or depending on where the publication is, Pennsylvania is the state that won Trump the presidency as the big swing state. And what's, in my opinion, interesting this time around is, again, we're seeing a lot of voter turnout, and Pennsylvania is much like many states. We've got two big clumpy population centers and just a whole bunch of scattered people.
So you're referring to, of course, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia.
That's right, yeah.
And the more rural areas that tend to go more Republican in the center of the state. Folks, counties like Bucks County and folks up and down the Susquehanna. We had Jordan Slobodinsky in here earlier speaking with us about being a voter from Lock Haven County.
Right.
Or not county, but from Lock Haven, Pennsylvania.
Where are you from, Sam? I'm not familiar.
I'm a local boy.
Okay,
I'm from
you are?
right up the street in Fox Chapel. So,
I am interested to hear because you were here 2 years ago. Other than the obvious, these are completely different races that are being run right now, with the exception of the House, because everything's up for grabs. But what do you think was different about Election Day itself? If you could assess that.
I think that Election Day last time was much more of a, oh, we got to do it, kind of like a grudging crisis prevention thing. I got a much more sense of hope from this election season. People are, I think, genuinely enthusiastic. The amount of people sharing vote stuff on both the left and the right. That's something I want to remind people of. Republicans vote too. All these people sharing, vote, vote, vote. Your right-wing friends are also sharing vote, vote, vote stuff. They are also hitting the polls. We're seeing massive turnout on both sides, and that's awesome. I hold the somewhat minority opinion that voting should be compulsory. You should be required to vote because it's your civic, duty. We are entitled to the chance to shape our country's future. Not enough people take advantage of that.
I don't have voter turnout numbers for the state at the ready, but I do have county numbers. And right now, we were talking about this just before the break. About 48% voter turnout. There are 448,000 ballots cast out of 941,000, and that's within the county, and that's of what's reporting right now. So that's important to make the delineation. Now, granted, that's 91% of the precincts reporting. What we're seeing is like 50% voter turnout.
And that's amazing. I mean, the presidential election was what, 30 something?
Yeah, it was somewhere
something?
between 25 and 30, at least in Allegheny County. And that was, this is really fascinating that people are coming to the polls.
Yeah, it's unheard of for a midterm election to get
right.
Like, if the presidential election doesn't get that, then you would think there's no way
you'd think
midterm would get a 50%.
You'd think,
especially from a younger crowd.
With presidential election, it's the president, it's the office, it's the figurehead of the country. More people should logically turn out for that, but this is a midterm election by all intents and purposes. This is normally sort of like, oh yeah, there's a midterm on tonight.
Yeah. Like a lot of times it gets just kicked under, brushed under the rug. Will I say? But yeah. And when you were at the polls, what time was that?
Oh, that was around 11-ish.
11 in the morning. What was it like there at that time?
My polling station is in the basement of my library.
Okay.
It's very small. There weren't a lot of people there, but they were already out of I voted stickers.
Really?
So
before 11.
Before 11. So I'm very surprised by that.
And disappointed you didn't get a sticker.
I know, right?
I got two, so if you want one, I will give you one.
My man.
Well, you're saying you voted twice. That's some controversy right there.
Well, that's actually a thing that I do want to talk about is the whole idea of voter fraud.
Oh, yeah,
because this was
do
a...
tell,
yeah. Go on.
You've heard Trump's talking point for the past 2 years that I think he's 3.5 is the number he settled on, million illegal immigrants voted in California. I just love the idea that there's some smoke-filled room at the Democratic headquarters. All right, we got 3.5 million illegal immigrants to vote for us. Where are we going to put them? California. That's a lock. All right. But it's a blue state. There's no conspiracy there. It's just there are people in California who vote blue. But the actual numbers of voter fraud are tiny. And I'm guaranteeing there will be investigation after investigation into voter fraud for this. And again, the numbers will be tiny. We'll be seeing, thousandths of a percent of people actually turning out with fraudulent votes because it just doesn't happen that often.
This gives me a point to talk from a standpoint of a poll worker.
Yeah, you were going over how guarded it is.
It's one of those things where in order to vote, if you're a first-time voter in Pennsylvania, you're required to show some form of identification. And then even if you're not, you are required to sign the voter register if you're voting in person.
Right.
And the poll worker, your judge of election or the registrar, whichever poll worker, it matches your signature against the on-record signature and verifies it, and then the next person does the same thing. And then at the end of the night, you're counting. All of the numbers need to match. At the beginning of the day, everything needs to be at a 0. Your number of votes at the end should match the number of voters that you have on a handwritten sheet as well as on a checkbox sheet, and it's at least the in-person voting, and yes, the absentee ballots as well, because that same procedure is followed for absentee ballots because you're required to sign the back of it. It's a fascinatingly secure process. Now, obviously, you're voting with electronic machines, and there's always a margin for error. And there are instances like what happened in Squirrel Hill earlier today, where emergency ballots had to be used, and you have provisional ballots. But at the same time, those are the exceptions. Those are not the rules. So it's really interesting to see that kind of talking point be brought up because when you look at the process, you try your hardest to clean it up as much. And so it's just interesting to see, as many people show up, and also all of these people are verified throughout, throughout this process that each county adopts as their own.
Right. Well, I mean, for example, let's say I wanted to double vote and pretend I was my dad as well, right? I don't know what his signature is. So just right off the bat there, that would be a security stop. And just something as simple as that is wildly effective. You've got to know the name and the signature. And, I mean, I don't know anyone who doesn't, practice constantly who can replicate other people's signatures accurately. It's a simple but effective system.
It's a fascinating concept, the idea of voter fraud and how it impacts elections. But basically, I mean, I know as a poll worker, you are held accountable for every last person that you let walk up to the machine. And I imagine that's the case in a lot of cases. I know it's the case in Allegheny County because even walking into the polling stations today, I was looking around for the zero tapes and for all of these little things that are trying to make it as secure as possible.
Yeah.
And welcome back. Before we introduce our next guest, we're going to get to answering some of those questions that are starting to roll in now. The one that we got was to describe how voter intimidation can impact and prevent people from voting in the election. And really, to answer it quite simply, and I'll try my best to explain this, it's really just that. It's really that push to prevent people from a particular party from getting out and voting. And I'll specifically reference a tweet from President Donald Trump that just recently came. He came under fire for tweeting this one out and was accused of voter intimidation, saying, quote, "Law enforcement has been strongly notified to closely watch any illegal voting, which may take place in Tuesday's election or early voting. Tuesday, anyone caught will be subject to maximum criminal penalties allowed by law. Thank you," unquote. That's from the president. He became under a lot of fire for that comment and was accused of voter intimidation. And so that's kind of a ploy to get people to stop voting. That's what people are accusing him of. So I hope that can best explain. We also have another one that says, why do you think that people don't vote as much in the midterm elections, as compared to the presidential elections? Putting that simply, I'll answer it by saying, It's a presidential election. A lot of people I think there's a big misconception whenever it comes to voting that the president holds all of the power as far as creating legislation and running the country, but there are a lot of people behind the scenes in the House, in the Senate that are making some of those decisions, writing the bills, and don't necessarily receive as much credit for it or media attention. However, a lot of people think that the president holds a little bit more power than he actually does. I think that's kind of why people don't necessarily vote as much in the midterm elections. Now, tonight in the CMI studio, UView is not the only outlet on campus tracking results. Just next door in the classroom space, students are working alongside Professor Steve Halleck to cover various local races and how each race has been covered in the media. Here with us now from Professor Halleck's class is Caroline Collins, former UView student, to discuss the Ohio Senate race between Democratic Sherrod Brown and Republican Jim Renacci. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, thank you too for having me. Thank you, UView, for having me back. It's such an honor to be, back where it all started for me. So now 3 years later, a full-time grad student and working in the TV news industry in Youngstown, Ohio at WFMJ, 21 WFMJ, the NBC affiliate. It's really fun to see how far you guys have come and to see the amazing facility that's here on campus now.
I was going to say a different look from the first time you were here.
I know. We were back when I was a student here. We were back at the library and we didn't have this beautiful, beautiful studio right on, what is this, Wood Street here? I mean, this is what you see when you walk down the street and you can look in and you can see all the students working. I mean, it's so cool to be back. I graduated in 2015, so to be back as a graduate student and to now be part of this big night is such an honor, and I'm so proud of everyone for all the hard work that you guys have put in. It's great. And this is how you get, into the real deal. So you guys are right on track.
Yes, and talking about hard work, I know as we mentioned before, you guys are hard at work in the next room. You've been following the race between Jim Renacci and Sherrod Brown.
Yes.
Can you tell us what you know about that so far?
U.S. Senate race. So this is a race that is gaining a lot of national attention, and it's really cool that I am studying and analyzing this race because I work in Youngstown, Ohio, and we cover northeastern Ohio and western Pennsylvania where I work as a reporter and as an anchor. And so to be able to cover this from an academic standpoint and from a journalism standpoint in my actual job is really, really interesting. Now there's about 10 of us over in the other room. We all have different races. So this is just my particular race that I'm covering. And it's been nothing short of dramatic and has gained a lot of national attention from Sherrod Brown allegations of abuse from his competitor Jim Renacci to the race actually now it's a lot closer than what the networks were calling a couple of hours ago when we first got into class. It's tightened up.
And working in the Ohio market, I mean, what are some of the responses that you hear from residents there? I'm sure they give a lot of feedback on this.
You're exactly right. Once you go into the community and you're a reporter, you end up talking to a lot of people who live in Youngstown and who are voters and are voting for either Sherrod Brown or Jim Renacci. As of right now, Sherrod Brown is in the lead, but he was in the lead a lot more a couple hours ago, and the networks projected him to win. You go to Youngstown, a lot of people are for Sherrod Brown. I mean, he's been in since like 2007, so people are used to him. They like him. He's a Democratic candidate. He supports a lot of the issues that the people, at least in northeastern Ohio, are passionate about. However, the governor's race right now is leaning a little bit more red. And a couple hours ago, it was leaning more blue. So Cordray and Mike DeWine. Mike DeWine's the Republican candidate.
Yes.
So, it's kind of a lot closer, I think, than many of us, at least reporters in Youngstown, thought it would be.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, at least in the Youngstown area, which is only about an hour north of here, are probably watching this really closely, saying, what is going to happen? Are we going to have the senator that we were used to since 2007, or are things going to flip? However, like I said, the networks, CNN, Fox, and MSNBC called a couple of hours ago that Sherrod Brown was the projected winner. So I'm assuming that it's going to stay that way, but it has, like I said, tightened up in the last hour or so.
Right. I want to stop it there. We're going to pick this conversation back up after the break. We're going to take the break. We'll have more with Caroline after this. Stay with us.
Live from Point Park University's Center for Media Innovation, Election Night 2018 will return after the break.
I know just the trick
bippity boppity boop. Much better. Guys, Samir Nefsky, and I'm outside of the Benedum Center right now. So in just a few moments, we're going to go inside the Benedum Center to talk to Trevor Dion Nicholas, who plays the genie in Disney's Aladdin. I'm Samir Nefsky giving you the theatrical scoop for the Berg. Hey guys, so I'm now inside the Benedum Center with Trevor Dion Nicholas, who plays the genie in Disney's Aladdin. What a treat that was to attend. But before the show started, I had the chance to go backstage and talk with one of the talented members of the cast, Bianca Horn. Let's take a look.
You're watching Election Night 2018 on UView Television.
Welcome back. We want to break into this section with breaking news of the election results. We told you we were going to be giving you constant, up-to-the-minute results, and here we have some from Connor Lamb. He was confirmed projected winner in District 17, special election race, PA over Keith Rothfuss. That was a 60% to 40%, and Connor Lamb has been confirmed. There you have that. And Bob Casey projected winner over Lou Barletta for the PA Senate. That's according to CNN. So there's some information from Pennsylvania for you. There's that. Now I'll have you take it away.
All right, well, Caroline, I want to get back to our interview. I know that you had started to cover a really heated race, another heated race. Can you go into a little bit more detail about that?
Yeah, sure. So we were talking about the Sherrod Brown, Jim Renacci Senate race in Ohio. Their debates got pretty ugly. Right now, it's kind of close. Sherrod Brown is the expected winner in Ohio, and he's been there since 2007. So he's the incumbent. But another big race is the Ohio governor's race. DeWine and Cordray. DeWine is the Republican candidate. Cordray is the Democratic candidate. And that race got pretty ugly. There were some attack ads run there. There was a lot of money raised for this race and a lot of funding and a lot of support from communities in Ohio, you know, raising funding or advocating, going door to door for these two candidates. Right now, it's pretty close, and from what I've seen, voter turnout is really going to be everything in that race.
Now, have you talked to any of the residents about which party they may be favoring during the governor's race?
Well, it's kind of interesting because obviously the outgoing Governor Kasich in Ohio, I mean, he ran for president, he's Republican, so, you know, will it flip? Will it go blue, or will it remain? I don't know. It's close right now. It's closer than I thought it was going to be right now. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And that's the fun thing about election night is you just don't know, and you wait for these results to come in. They start coming in so quickly.
Are they calling this a toss-up race for the gubernatorial race?
Well, yeah. I mean, really, it says that it's really going to be on voter turnout. That's what CNN was saying. That's what Fox was saying. As far as some of the articles that I'm glancing at now, it's still close, and it's really going to be on turnout. So I guess they both have great backgrounds. They're both familiar with, you know, the Ohio voters. So I guess we'll just wait and see.
And I know that a big thing on the table between the two of them, and I know we heard a lot about this in their debates, was their positions on the opioid epidemic.
Well, the opioid epidemic is just a huge issue in Ohio, and that's certainly something that all state lawmakers and even, you know, national politicians are talking about. President Trump actually gave, you know, more funding to the opioid epidemic, more funding for recovery and treatment and all that. So especially in northeastern Ohio, it's one of the worst places in the entire country for the opioid epidemic. And, you know, a lot of people lose their lives over this terrible addiction. And so it is something that on either side of the party, you have to support. And both
Right.
candidates, showed their support for that.
And I know that's something that Ohio residents saw on their ballot today, right? It's issue 1. Is that?
Issue 1 got voted down.
Oh,
It
wow.
did not go through. So issue 1 would have made drug possession just a misdemeanor. And it would have lessened the offense for drug possession. And law enforcement, at least the law enforcement that I have talked with, and some of the local judges and the local lawmakers were very against issue 1. We're telling people you need to vote no on issue 1 because they said it was going to make Ohio just a stomping ground for drug dealers and for drug use, and that it was going to make it even more dangerous. Those who are advocating for it said it's going to make treatment more readily available and it's going to help a lot of people. That got voted down today. So that is not going through. And that had a lot of support behind it. I mean, I'm talking millions and millions of dollars of support to vote yes to get it through. So it did get voted down. There were so many political ads on television, though, about issue 1, vote yes, vote no. So the voters spoke, and it did get voted down.
Absolutely. Great insight, Caroline. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Great job to the crew here and everyone involved tonight. Spectacular job.
All right, well, thank you. We hope to have you back. Maybe it'll be another remodel.
Yes,
next time you
perfect.
come.
Good luck with everything.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we're going to go ahead and take a look right now into another issue in this race, and that is LGBTQ rights. Kimberly Kagi investigated this, and she has more.
The LGBT community has faced attacks since President Trump was elected in 2016. They're using the midterms to make their difference.
Trump's latest attack on the LGBT community is to take the attack transgender community. He wants to take out the right of them to choose what they want to be identified as and just have it whatever is on their birth certificate.
Hot button issues are the main concerns for LGBTQ voters.
Especially like trans protections, that's been like a hot button issue for the last couple of years, especially with the president. So a lot of it is a main focus on that. I know after the 2016 election, there was a major concern about like same-sex marriage and same-sex adoption and everything that has to do with that. So those have been major concerns.
According to the national exit polling data of the estimated 10 million eligible LGBTQ voters in the United States, approximately 7 million voted in the 2016 election, and the trend is expected to continue. 2017 was known as the year of resistance for many voters, but 2018 is seen to be the year of action.
The year of action should. And our community is going to get out there and vote this year. They realize how important their vote is. And those that sat on the sidelines in 2016 are ready to get out there and make their voices heard.
And with their voices heard, they are looking to elect candidates that support pro-equality.
Statewide, we don't have any protections. We do have in individual counties, and Allegheny County actually is one that does include gender and sexuality as like workplace discrimination, like that is covered under there, but even just one county over in any direction doesn't have it.
Depot is hopeful that Western Pennsylvania will see a change with more LGBTQ elected officials.
I believe that we will. In this year, even in Western Pennsylvania, we have 2 candidates that are from our community that are LGBT that are running for office. There's only one representative right now that's out from that's Brian Sims out of Philadelphia. He's the only one in all of Pennsylvania. Well, we represent 5% of the population. There should be a lot more that is in government.
To find out more about the candidates endorsed by Steel City Stonewall Democrats, you may visit their website at steel-city.org. For UView Television, I'm Kimberly Kagi reporting from downtown Pittsburgh.
And when we return, we'll check back in with our media reporters at WPPJ as they break down tonight's results and answer your questions.
Plus, this is your last chance to get on the conversation by tweeting with the hashtag PointParkVotes, and we'll break down everything you need to know about net neutrality and its impact on tonight's races. We'll also break down some more results. We'll be right back.
The LGBT community has faced attacks since President Trump was elected in 2016. They're
Live
using
from Point
the
Park University's
Yeah.
Center for Media Innovation. Election Night 2018 will return after the break.
Tonight on Newsnight, we attempt to make a promo. That and more, next. Good evening and welcome to Newsnight. It is a day. I am an anchor. Here's some news. Now over to weather.
Look at all this weather!
Thanks, weather person. Now about an in-depth story.
Thanks, Anchor. Why do we have a story that's in-depth and possibly local?
Great, thanks. How about sports? Do we have sports? Sports are certainly happening, and here's a graphic to prove it. Wow, what a graphic. That's your news tonight, and I'm an anchor.
Getting hope today!
Hi, we're here to get hope today.
Each year, 2.7 million adoptable dogs and cats are euthanized in the U.S. According to the Humane Society of the United States, the amount of euthanized animals can be diminished if more consumers considered adoption rather than purchasing pets. All animals deserve hope for a happy home.
Come here, girl.
Be that hope for your next four-legged friend. Visit your local shelter for a chance at hope. Bring home hope.
You're watching Election Night 2018 on UView Television.
Around me, what else have I been missing out on? And so I started reading up for myself, and that's kind of how the change happened. It's when I realized that how much I cared for the LGBTQ community because of my connection to it via my Uncle Mike. And now I'm a member of it as well, because I realized in high school that I liked girls too.
So we're gonna reset here in a second, but I think it's thank you first off for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you.
And we are joined. We're joined in studio right now by Sarah Gibson, who is sharing her political journey with us. We earlier in the program we were talking with Jordan Slobodinsky, who similarly comes from a rural area of Pennsylvania, and was talking with us about how he decided what his political views are. So, for you personally, what are the issues that inform your vote?
Definitely human rights. I care a lot about human rights. I don't want to say that I don't care about, say, fiscal policy, but I think human rights are something that I understand a whole lot more, and there's something that I'm a lot more connected to. So mainly LGBTQ rights, the women's right to choose, women's rights, things like that, and immigration as well. But for the longest time, it's been LGBTQ rights and women's rights, because I didn't realize how much of a power struggle there still is today until I started witnessing it myself and actually like being there and seeing it happen right in front of my eyes, and it's just shocked me.
Could you elaborate on any points of inflection for you, or something that spoke out to you as this is when you not woke up, but like when you came to your own realization that this is where you stand on an issue? Is there any specific point, or was it kind of the culmination of a bunch of different ideas?
It was definitely a very gradual thing, and I will say that social media had a very big impact on it, particularly Instagram and Twitter. I've had Instagram since I was like 11, and then that became my way of seeing what people were thinking from all around the globe, and that's kind of like the door. And then Twitter, because it's mostly word-based, and I'm like an English nerd, so I love Twitter. I read it all the time. That's where I like learned more like the intricacies of policy, and that's where I really learned like where exactly I stand with certain things. Definitely with the women's rights and the women's right to choose, I was hard against it when I was a kid and up until I was 13 or 14, and then I started reading up on Planned Parenthood and what they do, and I started reading like actual women's stories of their experience, not only with Planned Parenthood but with the need to have an abortion or have access to affordable birth control, and I realized that this was something that needed to happen. And I also looked up studies on things like abstinence-only education because I wanted to know like what works better. And then I realized that in the states with abstinence-only education, those are the states that have the highest rate of teen pregnancies. So obviously something like that wasn't going to work, and teaching kids about these taboo topics is kind of something that has to be done. I guess it's a necessary evil. I mean, they're going to find out about it sooner or later. But if you don't tell them, or if you discourage them from learning about these things, that's what the need for things like birth control and abortions happen. Nobody wants them. But until we get accessible birth control for teens, and especially those in poverty, because that's where the highest rate of teen pregnancy comes from, then we're still going to need it. And we're still going to have higher rates of it until that happens.
And so, Dennis, you've waved my direction. Do we have numbers?
We do have numbers. There are numbers. We love numbers.
Our apologies again. This is a bit haphazard how we're doing things, but as we get information, we're relaying it to you. Dennis, what are you seeing?
I'm seeing that Texas has been called.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. By both The Guardian and CNN, who it's been called by both those polling places, and it's been called for Ted Cruz.
Okay.
Very surprising, not surprisingly necessarily, but it's been a very contentious race there, and it's been very interesting to see the result. So to me, that unfortunately for the Democrats at least, means that if they lose one more seat, which right now it would be North Dakota is the one they'd want to be looking to steal, which has been called by CNN but not by the other sources. They will lose. They will definitely lose the Senate. That does not mean
referring to the Democrats.
Yes, referring to the Democrats. Right now, the Republicans have 49 seats for sure that have been called. In it, you could almost include North Dakota in that, which would put them at 50, and that would tie the election up. And even if Democrats managed to win every single seat after that, it would still tie would go to Mike Pence.
So that's the Senate then.
Yes, that's the Senate. However, if we're still looking at of course we're still looking at it, but if we look at the if we look at the House race, still the Democrats have flipped another seat, and now they're at 11 up. But according to The Guardian, at least, it's 126 seats for the Republicans and 108 for the Democrats, which is misleading because they haven't all been counted yet, of course. And if you asked CNN, they've counted quite a few more because CNN likes to beat everyone to the punch.
Oh my.
Yes. Yeah, I love CNN. They're a great source, but they really like to get their election results in as early as possible, and it bites them in the butt sometimes. But they've counted 134 for the Democrats and 131 for the Republicans.
And we'll give you updates periodically. But to get back to our conversation with Sarah Gibson live in studio with us here, now we talked about how when I asked you, what are the issues that you inform your vote on, you said rather broadly human rights.
Yeah.
So what was a lot of folks talk about, when they come to college, they have a more diversified experience or what have you. Was that the point for you, or was that, and if you could elaborate a little bit more on your personal views.
Okay. No, college was not the turning point for me because I was a poll booth worker in the 2016 presidential election because I was not yet old enough to vote. So I figured this is my way of participating because I cannot actually vote. And I remember knowing then that I was a Democratic person and that I didn't agree with most of the views. And I'd say that my views back then are pretty similar, if not identical, to the ones I have now. I've remained pretty unchanging on those. Which kind of one would you want me to elaborate on? Can you ask that again?
When you talk about what informs your vote, first off, let me also ask the other question of, do you vote in, are you registered in Pittsburgh, or are you registered where your hometown is?
I'm registered in Pittsburgh. Originally I was, but then I changed it when I moved here because I figured I would sooner come here and vote at the Epiphany Church or something like that than either have to get an absentee ballot or have to go all the way home and stand in the middle of a post office with the rest of the people in my voting district and have to vote like that on a day where I knew that I had stuff like school, and I had stuff like this because I've just been participating in the giant UView stream that was happening. So I knew that like
Is currently we're on it.
it's currently happening. But I knew that like I wanted to stay here. Things that have I guess inform my voters, swing me, is definitely, I'd say, locally, education. I think education's a really big thing right now, and I know today when I voted, they had that question where it's like, do you think we should establish a children's fund and things like that? And I definitely think that we need to be focusing more of the budget on things like education and after-school programs for at-risk children.
Yeah, that's something we've been keeping an eye on. Do you have
Yeah,
those stats pulled
I have.
up? Can we get an update on it?
Again, I'm going to give you the larger and then the smaller. We've got 96% of precincts reporting in Allegheny County per the numbers here. Voter turnout is at 52.3%,
Wow.
which, again, that's pretty big for a midterm. And then the referendum that you were referring to, the amendment to the Allegheny County Home Rule Charter to establish a children's fund, the no's are leading 51.8% to the yeses 48.1%. And it's been close all night, the yeses and nos. And you know, to dig into that is a fascinating look at local politics and how you get a referendum on the ballot and that kind of a thing. You said you were in favor of that.
Yes.
What do you know about it? What can you tell our listeners about what research you've done?
Yikes.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's totally fine. That's totally fine.
I read, my purse is in the other room, but I read a card
Yeah.
about it that they had that was available at the polling place, and I thought it was a good idea because generally I do believe that we need to be investing more money in education. I mean, I'm sad to say I don't know a lot of the exact things on that because I only looked up a sample ballot yesterday evening where I saw that question, and that's the first time that I heard about it. And then this morning when I went to vote, that was the first time that I actually read the whole thing that was about it. But generally, I do think we need to be investing more money in our kids because I was I went to a public school. I think I think we all went to public schools.
Yeah.
And so we've all kind of seen the way that things are supposed to work, and I think we definitely need curriculum overhauls, and I think we need to adjust the way that we look at children. I think we need a much more individualized approach, especially with kids with maybe disabilities like autism who have the smarts but just need to be taught in a different way. I also think that the grading system that we currently have, I'm not a big fan of it because I don't think that it properly evaluates the intelligence of the kids, and that's why I think we need to be paying more attention to education, because you have these kids leaving school thinking that they're not smart or that they shouldn't go to college or that maybe they have to go to college because that's the only way to get a good job, but that's not what we should be doing. What we should be doing is teaching the kids or helping them learn what they're good at and then giving them the right steps to finding out how they can do that when they graduate as a job.
And one of the key takeaways from this election is more folks are getting more civically involved, and that starts at the education system and moves right on up. Again, 52.3%. Now this is with 96% of precincts reporting. 52.3%. The voter turnout this evening in Allegheny County, which again, that I can't emphasize enough. As someone who's worked polls before, who understands what a midterm is and how slow those days usually are, this is a fascinating takeaway. And so I thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to, since this is our last cut-in, thank the UView television crew for cutting in and talking with us throughout the evening. And we wish you all the best of luck on your end as things move along here. So yeah, it's
back. We're going to hear more on net neutrality from Nick Tomarello in just a moment, but first let's get to some of your election results. The results continue to come in. Here are some of the headlines. AP is reporting Republican Senator Ted Cruz of Texas has defeated Democratic Representative Beto O'Rourke. Complete election coverage will be coming from AP. We're definitely going to hear more on that. Also, ABC News and CNN has both reported that Republicans have received the 50 necessary seats to keep control of the Senate. Now, as of 10/18, so this is a little bit older, out of date here right now, but as of 10/18, Republicans led the House 153 to 50, very close there. Still a close call. Democrats need 14 pickups to make that happen.
Now I want to transition a little bit to our Twitter submissions. We have our final question, and The final question was, how much does the weather affect voter turnout? And I looked on Fair Districts PA, which is a nonpartisan organization, and they say rain reduces voter turnout by 1 inch. So I hope that you grabbed your umbrella and you still stood in line at the polls. I knew that the weather was supposed to let up this afternoon and into this evening, which I think it has. I've talked to a lot of people today, and they say that, you know what, this was the election that they've actually waited in line for.
Wow. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if it's something, polls are inside for the most part, so I don't think it would really have much of an impact. You said 1 inch?
1 inch.
Okay. All right. But real quick, before we throw it back over to Nick, we have a couple more results that we want to get to you right now. The first openly gay governor has been in history, has been the projected winner of Colorado governor race. A projected winner is Jared Polis. He's 51.4% in the lead against Walker Stapleton. He has 45.2. Again, Polis will be the first openly gay governor in history. So we are talking more history is being made, more milestones are being reached in this election. So.
And now that you mention history, the first youngest woman of Congress has been elected from New York, Alexandra Cortez, and that's exciting.
Yeah, a lot of history is
exciting.
being made here now. So let's switch gears over to Nick Tomarello. We talked to you about him in the beginning. He's going to tell us about net neutrality and what exactly it means. Nick.
Thanks, Royce. The United States Supreme Court declined to hear arguments on net neutrality laws on Monday. The regulation states that all internet service providers should allow the public to access any and all content on the internet without favoring or blocking websites and products. The regulation also prohibits providers from managing how fast or how slow content loads on your screens. The Federal Communications Commission adopted these regulations under the Obama administration in 2015, and the regulation was repealed under the Trump administration on July 11th. Ajit Pai, the new chairman of the Federal Communications Commission, said in a video statement that the FCC still requires internet service providers to be transparent, and that, quote, every internet service provider must clearly disclose its network practices upfront to consumers who can determine whether those practices meet their needs. According to The Hill, the Washington, D.C. Circuit Court will begin to hear arguments for net neutrality in February, and the laws could go back all the way to the Supreme Court.
Nick, thank you so much. On the other side of the break, we'll round out our election night coverage with an overview of what is ahead. Plus, Nick Tomarello will file his report from the field earlier today, and we'll discuss voter turnout and how that went at Point Park.
That and more on the other side of the break. Stay tuned.
Live from Point Park University's Center for Media Innovation, Election Night 2018 will return after the break.
The show that starts your Friday mornings has returned with both familiar and new faces. Daybreak hosts Taylor Fife and Delaney Bomis are bringing you the latest updates in Pittsburgh and Point Park news. We also have a variety of talent on our free segments. Whether it be singing, dancing, or indeed egg smashing. Start your mornings with us at Daybreak on UView at UView Television.
Hi, we're here to get hope today.
Each year, 2.7 million adoptable dogs and cats are euthanized in the U.S. According to the Humane Society of the United States, the amount of euthanized animals can be diminished if more consumers considered adoption rather than purchasing pets. All animals deserve hope for a happy home.
Come here, girl.
Be that hope for your next four-legged friend. Visit your local shelter for a chance at hope. Bring home hope.
What concerns do you have about the university, student life, safety, food service? Send us an email to studentconcerns@pointpark.edu or stop by our office on the 7th floor of the Student Center. You can also attend our weekly open meetings on Mondays at 3:15. Follow us on social media at USG_PPU for more. The United Student Government. By the students, for the students.
Broadcasting from the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, you're listening to the sound of Point Park University, WPPJ 670 AM.
watching Election Night 2018 on UView Television.
And now that we're back, we'll transition into Nick Tomarello. Our reporter talked to a few people on the streets, and he asked them what kind of issues are the main platforms that they're voting on and what they're really looking for in an ideal candidate.
Yeah, we're going to hear from them right now. Go ahead and take a listen.
Yes. Most definitely.
I have already submitted my absentee ballot.
Yes, I already did that.
Yes, I do plan on voting.
Absolutely. I'll be there bright and early. I think the biggest issues that matter to me, there are so many, but the biggest issues that matter to me right now are climate change and equality across the board, not just gender equality, not just race equality, not just like sexual expression equality. I just want us to be able to live in a world where everyone can feel seen and included.
If you couldn't tell, I'm a woman of color. Again, a woman of color. So there are a lot of, issues surrounding that are extremely evident.
The school system, school funding.
The government is absolutely littered with people like Brett Kavanaugh.
Healthcare, societal equality.
I think just like LGBTQ issues are really important, and like race relations and like immigration is super important, and I just feel like we're not touching on that in a healthy way.
Not as much vitriol, like in our politics, if that makes sense.
These old white fat cats who are able to live without consequence of their action.
I think that we've gotten to a really strong situation of regression, and we're not progressing. So I feel like we need to continue to like beat that over the head almost.
Hopefully the world starts to listen. Hopefully the people in power start to listen, because there are so many people right now that are screaming, and because of the people that are in power, they're not listening and they won't do anything about it.
Well, I hope that the Republicans lose some of their base.
Well, and the reason I say that is because many of them are afraid to stand up to a lot of the discrimination that Donald Trump spews. Because if Republicans had a backbone and stood up to the person in power, I would have no problem maybe supporting some of them, but I've always been a Democrat, so I hope that Democrats take power.
I'm hoping that it will even out the House and Senate in terms of just like being more representative of like the country in a whole. Like, we're getting a new influx of voters this year because we have a bunch of like younger kids being able to like register to vote and get out there and do that. So I think it'll change how we're being represented in politics.
It's important for Americans to vote because it's our say on who's to run us, and if you're just going to let people get into office who don't know what they're doing, who aren't running the country right, you want the right people running the place in which we live.
Because it's literally our only control that we have. Like, you are voting people in to be your voice, so we have to go out and vote if we want our voices to be heard.
Especially, like we're young. So our whole life we've been hearing like, you are the future, you are the future. And we've gotten to the point where I feel like I'm saying it now. I'm like, you are the future. Like, we need to, instead of like just throwing it on other people, we need to start acting on it ourselves.
People die for your right to vote. People have been fighting for over 250 years for us to get the right to vote, and our democracy is an experiment, and people literally flee countries and die and take boats like to get to democracy and to get to the United States.
Because it is our duty to vote. We were founded so that we had the ability to express ourselves and say what we wanted and to get that done.
And it is just extremely disrespectful when I hear people say that they don't want to vote, because I'm like, you are taking for granted such an important right that everyone else in the world values, but we are so spoiled that people don't realize it.
As bad as the system has been from the beginning, it's our job to fix it.
Please vote. Don't feel like your vote doesn't matter, because it does. Stand up for what you believe in. Advocate for equality and resist discrimination.
This is our home. You can't treat your home like it's nothing. You gotta love it, even when it's not loving you back.
Get out and vote. Like, just do it. If you're like, I don't see why you wouldn't, you know, like this is something that you have a say in. So, and it's pretty difficult to have when you don't really have any power. You kind of have all this power.
It's so important to make sure you know the facts, make sure you know who supports what, make sure you're not just voting because your friend says that they're a good person to vote for, make sure that you're making your decision for yourself. Okay, Nick, thank you so much. Breaking news right now, that blue wave that everybody has been talking about is not going to appear after all. Here's some of the headlines that we are seeing now. This source, AP, they say GOP retains Senate control for 2 more years, shattering the Dems' dream of an anti-Trump wave sweeping into the majority. You've heard talks about this over the last few days. You've heard potential fears. We've been talking about that referendum against President Trump, his entire agenda. There was some fears there. I know a lot of media outlets were sort of digging into some of his responses whenever reporters were asking him about questions about his fears, about, the sort of there being that flip, that, the Democratic Party really just coming in and taking control of things. I know that the president didn't necessarily come out and say specifically that he had some concern there, but a lot of, they sort of analyzed it, broke it down, and he definitely did hint, though he didn't say it specifically, he definitely did hint to a little bit of fear there. Now, I know past polls will show, past elections will show that typically the president and the political party that is in control tends to sort of flip during midterm elections, and I have to say, it's a little bit shocking to find out that that cycle is being a little bit broken.
Well, Bruce, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I have seen a lot of on Trump's Twitter feed that he says, a vote for Republicans is a vote for me.
Yes.
And that's kind of what we see here. And it's actually interesting. So I'm looking at the headlines right now, and it says Headcamp falls in North Dakota Senate race, which is a key pickup for the GOP. And while some politicians are making strides against what their past used to be, like Mitt Romney won the Utah Senate seat, launching a new act in his political life. They're making strides, and I think we will see this is going to set the tone for the 2020 presidential election.
Absolutely. Speaking of the president himself, I mean, I have his Twitter pulled up here. We haven't seen anything from him or really the White House in the past 5 hours. I'm looking here to see President Trump's last tweet and continue to scroll here. He hasn't really said anything about these elections so far. So I think that as all of the results finalize and come in, it's going to be very interesting to see his position, what he has to say. I'm sure he's going to give. It's been a historic election. I'm sure we'll hear historic statements from the president in regards to this election. So
I think if you're interested in seeing what the president has to say, definitely tune in to his Twitter feed tomorrow, and all the major networks will be covering the results of the election without do so.
Absolutely, and that pretty much sums up our election coverage here for Point Park. It's been great working with you today. Everybody behind the scenes has been doing a great job, you guys. We have a team of researchers who have been behind the scenes gathering information for us this entire time. I know we did election coverage back in 2016. I'm not so sure if we've done midterm elections before. I think this is the first time that we have done midterm elections here at Point Park University. So making history here too, making milestones. So,
and we definitely would like to extend our gratitude to our partners at WPPJ, the Globe, and the Journalistic 151 classes, and Steve Halleck's class. We can't thank you enough for all the effort that you put into our production and giving us the information as it comes in and allowing us to be able to put on the best production possible for us.
Absolutely. We heard fantastic things from a lot of great people here today. Vanessa was one of them. I mean, my God, her story that she shared on the couch with us earlier about her journey towards, citizenship. I mean, it has really been that really, I know we had some crew. I hate to spill the beans on this one, but we had some crew in the studio actually with us who say that they were tearing up. We didn't see because we were focusing on the conversation, but we did definitely hear that it was actually provoking some tears from that discussion. In case you missed that, she really talked about how we were talking about illegal immigration. She actually was born in the Middle East, right?
In Venezuela, and she moved to the Middle East when she was about 8 years old. And
yes.
So she's now a student at Point Park, but she's on an immigration visa for education.
Yes, and she mentioned how she doesn't precisely identify. She's very fair-skinned. She doesn't necessarily fit into the stereotypical makeup of a person of color. She's very fair-skinned. She has a very, loose, straight hair pattern, a lot of different, features that don't necessarily apply to that stereotypical person of color. And she said that she's faced a lot of discrimination for this, and we definitely heard a powerful story from her. So thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you to everybody at home for watching, for tuning in, for submitting your questions. You guys have made, again, we can't thank our crew enough for this, our team of researchers, people on the camera, everybody in the control room, our executive producer, Nicole Pampena. It's just been a wonderful night, so we want to thank you guys.
I'm Kimberly Keggy alongside Roy Stones reporting for UView Television.